Et il y a 45 personnes qui ont vu la vidéo. Ouais. La vidéo de... C'est Mathias. C'est ça qui a fait plus de clics en fait.
Pas de couleur, quand c'est jaune, enfin orange, c'est quoi? Non, quand c'est rouge, c'est que c'est pas rendu, j'imagine.
Que c'est entre les deux. Après, Lille, elle va recevoir, tu te rappelles, elle a parlé d'elle, elle va recevoir juste des notifications, elle ne va pas avoir une note. Je crois qu'elle a dit, je ne vais pas vendre les trucs, mais elle a insisté sur les notifications. Alors, justement, et après, avec Sarah Bauer, je ne sais pas, elle
n'a pas été fait.
Ouais, elle n'a pas été notée, mais elle n'a pas. Je pense que c'est une collègue. Tu ne vas pas écrire vite.
Elle n'a pas été notée. Là, sur les travail, elle est dans la merde, je vais la faire mesurer.
Là, il faut se connecter aussi à haut. Il y a un moment.
Oh merde, putain, elle n'a pas payé. Qu'est-ce qu'elle n'a pas fait le virement? Elle n'a pas payé. Elle qu'on paye avant que moi, je sais, c'est quand même chiant que j'ai pas la main sur le compte pour ça. Bah, on peut pas se plafonner, tu vois, on pourra bien payer par contre. Je voulais vendre dans les cafés pendant ses vacances, mais là. C'est un petit texto. Ok, hop.
Et c'est comme ça, par exemple, pour le mois de décembre.
Ah ouais, sur le message.
Donc, alors, certains, je me souviens. Ah, je ne sais même pas, je sais pas.
Je suis d'accord avec le fait que les trucs sont
Ah, je comprends pas ça.
Tu vas dans la chaîne.
j'ai dit ceux qui ont pas
Lundi, mercredi, alors, on va faire un exercice. Je suis certainement rassuré. Non, mais c'est au lieu de mettre le cours de vendredi, le mardi, comme ça, je finis. Ah, il est là. J'avais compris ce que tu fais.
Mais oui, oui,
Ah,
parce que
c'est
les gens
vachement de merde.
on ne peut pas dire aux gens qui peuvent les 2 semaines.
Et toutes les questions qui sont sur la c'est la même œuvre.
Ouais. Les 2 semaines.
Du coup, genre, tu peux absolument rien faire. Parce que, par exemple,
Mais quand même, sans...
celui-là, on peut.
Ouais, ça fait
Avec moi.
plus.
Et là, je sais que j'ai des mouvements trop agréables. Mais comme j'ai fait cela, ils disent ah, celui-là il tombe en même temps, il faut vous pouvez faire qu'un seul.
C'est sûr. Attends, je regarde.
Moi, je n'ai rien
Vas-y.
de sociologie des mouvements sociaux européens de l'Est.
Ah non, mais on me disait pratiquer en disant.
Non, mais
Il y a eu un certificat pour l'école d'hiver.
Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire en ligne? Non, non, on l'a pas encore lancé.
Tu veux que je te l'envoie le certificat d'école d'hiver?
Yes. Je sais pas du tout.
Lucienne, c'est toi qui va faire.
Oui, je suis très contente.
Ouais. Donc, Lucienne.
Okay, I don't have the camera. Okay. Okay, yes, the most important is that Gareth will be speaking in 5 minutes. And Gareth will open the workshop by translating into technical feasibility issues, etc. All that we've been telling him about the tool that we want to develop, but that we don't know yet what would be the categories, what would be the functionalities, because all the collective discussion is here to see like what we want to feature on the website. But we have a broad idea of broad categories of types of contents and information that we want to feature, of types of news feeds that we would like to have on the website, of options of interaction, like should there be a discussion forum, should there be a contact form. Like we opened all the questions, but don't have the answers yet. We have to see them together. The structure of the workshop, I hope it was clear, and I hope it will be, it's really experimental because it's not like a conference where we have a series of interventions and then to comment and debate. It's really to reflect together on all the issues. So we try to have an approach. I just want to say that we prepared the program together with Samar, Afizeh is there, in Beirut. And yes, and who's there from the beginning, because even pre-LEILA, when we thought of developing a non-for-profit agency in France, it was with Samar, and so we've been brainstorming for a long time. So we hope that the structure of the workshop will help us to tackle all the issues. This morning already some questions have been raised that we will have to add to the debate. When Terre Astier was talking, we had this question of the rights, of decision making that should take place, maybe about dealing with the authors who are not represented, etc. Like there are some questions that were raised today that already aren't there in the workshops, but I think everything will fit to have the discussion. Also, when Marcia mentioned the database of resource persons, translators, etc., that she has, this is for me a kind of side discussion because we won't feature it on the website, like we will never put online. I think this is what we already discussed with the translators in R, that we don't want to put the database in open access on the platform because we want the database to be a co-optation in a very concrete way. You know what I mean? When you know about the quality of the translators, etc., etc. So this would be in journal cuisine to have a maybe shared database with Marcia and all that, but these are questions that were raised this morning that are not here, but we can discuss, of course, about everything. So the first workshop was, and it's also already thanks to Gareth that we knew the first question that we had to ask is, what is the main feature of the website? What do you want from this website, and who are you targeting, etc. So this first. So in the first workshop, we also thought that this is the moment where we have at some time to discuss the issue next to the parallel issues of what to feature, what targets audience. We first always said the discoverability to the web platform will be targeting European publishers, but we're thinking that it would also be interesting to extend it to cultural operators. And we also have Bozar as one of the consortium partners who would be also taking up a kind of leading role in trying how to connect the houses of poetry, the institutions welcoming Arab authors, and maybe also sometimes performances like theater games are also important to circulate, etc. And we're mentioning graphic novel with Thierry, which always also comes with exhibitions, etc. So it's open to debate, but we think that maybe we should extend the target group. It should stay professionals. It's not for the wider audience, but maybe we should extend it to cultural operators, so we can discuss pro and contra, etc. But so next to the issues about who we are targeting and what is the main feature and narration of the website, there is this question about what LEILA, what kind of collective LEILA represents. And if we think that we will, that a statement in the apropos section would be enough to clear our approach and our history and who we are, etc., and the network organization, or if maybe we might need, or it might be helpful to have a board of tutelary figures. I'm saying this because some of the issues that we will have, and we already noticed it in ARL, are complicated when we have to tackle issues such as sometimes the poor editorial work that has been made on the core steps. And this is very difficult if we are also today, like today and tomorrow, we are mainly Europeans, and then we will, of course, have a dialogue also with our physics experts. But it's difficult to be the European, the representative of a European project saying, so let's discuss the poor quality editor. So we think that maybe, and we were waiting until this first meeting took place, maybe a strong partnership with AFAC, or maybe establishing a board of tutelary persons, so that even if they are not like really working in the kitchen with us, but that they accept to be like the umbrella names or something like this could be also an option. So I think this we could also discuss in the first workshop, because it's part of the narrative of the and of the mediation of how we will present ourselves and then the other two workshops, because I don't want to lose all the time saying what we will be saying. So the two other workshops, I think it's also easy to understand the structure. We thought tomorrow morning we could discuss about all the existing info that is already out there in different formats. Sometimes it's websites such as Arabic, sometimes it's links to reviews such as Banipal, Hamish of Al-Jumhuriyya, so of a news feed content by itself, etc. Sometimes it's PDFs or Excel sheets like Richard's study, but now it's an Excel sheet about the works translated from Arabic to French the 10 last years, and the previous study of Emmanuel Barlet as well. So the workshop tomorrow morning will be what are all the types of resources that are there, which one we want to incorporate, and how we will do that, with linking them, with downloading some material. And there will also always be, I think, the question of selectivity, like what will be our criteria or so on, or selectivity, will it be like the co-optation again? And of course, we want to avoid having bad content featured there at some time, but then we have also to always discuss what is good and what is bad, etc. So tomorrow morning it will be about already existing resources, and tomorrow afternoon it will be about the resources that we can create. So of course there will be the mediation content to create, like to introduce the links that we're linking to, etc. This is just a small part of the content creation, and then there is the content creation that comes out of our reflection, like this is needed, this is needed, this is needed. So part of it is already. So I'm getting back to my intros this morning, like we have a limited amount of resources, and so the budget that we have for the 3 years of LEILA project is already allocated to some content creation, so we cannot finance to create much more content than what we thought of. But some of this content is not self-defined, such as a blog feed, so we can discuss what is the best way to have a blog. Should we have one or two? Should we have a blog kind of a critic on in original version, like to translate some critics for monthly column from the Arab world, to have something else and always Arabic literature in English, call it like Arabic literature in Arabic and translate it, etc. Like there are more ideas, but so the content creation, there is what we can do with LEILA 1, and then there are the big ideas of what we want to work on for LEILA 2. One of the big ideas being this database of translated works into European languages, and we'll have to discuss the 10 last years or the 20 last years, etc. We have the example of the US translation database that we'll also show tomorrow. So this would be one of the big projects we think for LEILA 2. Another big project would be, and then what we were saying with Pierre Asté this morning would also be then to be considered for how we will do that. Maybe it would be like 100 authors. Like for the first LEILA, and we will discuss it in the workshop, we are more about the selection of titles of a catalog that would maybe be now 50 titles, to also discuss with the translators about the process, etc., and to be discussed here. But so it will be a titles based. But of course, the goal of the website at the end in LEILA 2 would be like any website, new books from Germany, from Spain, etc., to have a database of others. And so I'm mentioning all this now because, of course, we would like not to do a very small website now, a WordPress, or James Garris will explain to us like the options we have. But I think we should from now on know what we want to do also, so that we develop a tool that can then host all the contents we want to bring even later. Like we cannot be certain of the sustainability of it now, but we hope for it. We'll do our best to make it work and to make it sustainable and to have a LEILA 2 after LEILA 1. So this is the structure and the idea of what we do. Sorry, I took too long.
Thank you, Lucienne. So this is going to be a very different presentation to what we've seen so far. Here we go. Can you see? Yes, here we go. We've done instructions already, so you know about me. This is just to show you that my Arabic looks like the Arabic of a 3-year-old child. I'm trying my hardest. Yes, so I mentioned briefly this morning, I've worked on many projects similar to this with Bookwitty and with other projects from blog-based websites.
There's a technical problem.
Oh, yeah, you have to show your document. On Zoom.
Oh, you have to share.
Oh, on Zoom, okay. I thought it was already shared.
Yes, so that people online can also see what we're showing.
Okay.
So just take one minute.
So like, it says écran partagé. So
Exactement.
so I just have to do this. Yeah.
Perfect.
Can the people in the computer see this now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is me.
Guys, we can also close the window like the screen. Yes.
So yeah, my role today and tomorrow is just to be here to provide technical guidance, to understand what is possible, and we've talked briefly about the different potential parts of the website. You know, we've talked about les outils de découvrabilité. We've talked about the catalog, maybe a blog, some kind of forum, communication tools, all these kind of things. I'm not going to go too much into the specifics of what they might look like, because we're going to be talking about that over the next 2 days. What I want to talk more about is just a general methodology of how a project like this might work, and especially the sort of risks that we're going to be coming up against. Because my job as a developer is obviously to develop the website, but it's also to manage the risks and to make sure that we get to a successful solution. So I'll talk a little bit about, you know, what is possible. So I'll be here if there's any questions about, can we do this or can we do that? The answer to those questions is always, or pretty much always, yes, but most things are possible. It's just, it depends on the scope. It's like everything's possible, but do we have the time? Do we have the money? Do we have the resources? So that's always a trade-off between what we'd like and what's actually feasible in terms of the whole project. I'll talk about what sort of technologies we can use potentially. I'm not sure. I'll talk about later. And the risks, especially the risks. That's a big part of, for me, managing a project like this is to manage the risks, because if you can keep the risks to a minimum, you have a greater chance of getting to like a successful end result that everyone's happy with.
What do you mean by risks?
Well, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's anything that could empêche, just to stop us getting to a successful result. So the risks that would derail the project, the risks that would mean that we're not going to be able to succeed in the project. For me, from a technical point of view, the output of this meeting, in terms of what I'd like to see, is a clear idea of the specifications, what we need, what the functionality is, how that works, and all that would be the scope of the project, if you like, for the developer. And we talked earlier about my role going forwards. At the moment, I mean, I'm loving being involved in this project at the moment. I don't know if I will be involved to the end in terms of the development. That will also depend on my schedule, my responsibilities going forwards, and also the type of technologies we choose, because I've got a certain set of skills. And even if I can talk about all these things and I understand the technology requirements, I might not be the right person, depending on the specific technology that's chosen in the end, to do this. But the idea for me, at least, is that I will be gathering the specifications as we talk, as we discuss, helping everyone out with understanding of what's possible technically, and then compiling that into something that we can say this is a clear a clear list of what we need. What does success look like? What is the successful aboutissement of this project? Okay, so in terms of technical decisions that need to be made, what sort of platform are we building? Are we building something that can be built on top of a blog platform like WordPress? So WordPress, probably everyone knows WordPress, it powers something like 30% of all the websites on the internet. And people think of a classic blog where you have like a post, but in reality, WordPress is much more flexible than that. And there are a large number of modules you can install for different functionality, and also custom development. So it's possible also to build custom development and custom functionality into WordPress. Another CMS content management system is another platform that would allow us to manage that content online. WordPress is obviously the most well-known of these, but there are several other ones. And otherwise, a custom development would mean developing the site from scratch, coding everything from zero. There are advantages and disadvantages of each of these solutions. Obviously, WordPress comes with a lot of functionality built in. It means you install WordPress and you've already got like maybe 50 or 60% of what you need. The majority of the work then would be just like styling the website, making it look like the designs, and then building that extra custom functionality. Depending on what that custom functionality is, it may or may not be possible or possible to do it in WordPress. It might be more interesting to do a custom development. Obviously, like a custom development, it means more time, more expenses, but it's much more flexible. So that's part of the discussion we'll be having over the next few days in terms of functionalities. Like, can we do this based on a more simple platform, or do we need to go to something that's much more specific and much more custom? So yeah, we're not. I just wanted to mention that, so in case those words come up, and if you're not aware of what those different things mean, but we're not going to make a decision here. We're not going to say, okay, it's going to be WordPress or it's going to be a custom development, but we'll have all the inputs necessary for me to be able to talk to developers or talk to Lucien, and then make that decision based on the output of this meeting. So the other non-technical risks, and these are actually the more important ones for me, are the product requirements and the project management, which means that we can come up with all these ideas, and we can come up with a really clear idea of the cahier des charges, the specifications of the website. But if we don't have that really clearly defined, then that's a risk for the future in terms of once we start building something, we're going to start building something, and then because we weren't sure about what we needed, we have to change our mind, we have to change the decision, and that means extra complexity and extra risk to the project. So this is like a classic computer science type diagram that everyone who is involved in development knows about. This is like the three kind of risks, and this is always like an equilibrium between the three parts of the project. There's the scope of the project, so what we're building, the exact specifications, how many different functionalities are on the website, the time required to do that, and then the cost of the websites. And all these are obviously flexible, but excuse me, as you can see, the quality here is basically the quality of what we're building. And as you could also say that the quality is just the entire result of what we're building. And as scope gets bigger, the time required is going to get bigger and the cost is going to get bigger. So that's just something to be aware of as we talk about what we want. Like in an ideal world, we would have this amazing system that would do everything that everyone wants. But obviously, like to build that system that does everything, we're going to need like more time, or it's going to cost more. So there's a question of like limiting our aspirations to make sure that we're building something that is reasonable in the time required and on budget.
Managing expectations.
Exactly. So yeah, so this is just a quick list of things to be aware of, and in my experience and in general, why projects fail, and that's what I'm talking about managing risks, because that's for me the most important part is like reducing the risks so that we maximize the possibility of getting exactly what we need. So yeah, so the purpose or the requirements of the project aren't clear. And Lucien, you talked about this earlier, like who is the client? And I think there's a discussion about this later, but at least for me at the moment, it's pretty clear. But it could be something that's still unclear or to be negotiated or to be discussed. Who is the client? And more importantly, what are their needs? It's one thing to say, okay, it's publishers or it's people who have an interest in Arabic literature. But what are their needs? What does success look like for them? So if we're targeting publishers, for example, what is the actual need of publishers? And when will publishers be able to say, okay, this tool fulfills my needs? This is a tool I will use, because it's one thing to identify the user, but then another thing to understand what success looks like for them. The second one, so design or deliverables are not defined. So there's this concept called scope creep, which is when you have a scope and you think you're building one thing, and then all of a sudden people will say, oh yeah, I didn't remember about this, we have to have this functionality or that one. And oh, wouldn't it be great if we could also do this? And things like, for example, we could start building this amazing website, and then halfway through someone will say, oh, but like, you do realize it has to work on mobile. And then it's like, okay, like no one told me that, so we have to go back and make sure that it's compatible with mobile. All these things here. So it's like this is never a perfect thing where you get to list the functionality. It's like, okay, this is it, and like this far and no further. But if you can look at the possibilities and either include or exclude the different possibilities of functionalities as soon as possible, then it means that we're much more sure to have a successful project. And obviously things always change. There's always uncertainty, but just managing this is very important. And the same thing for the schedule. So like knowing how long we have, what the dates for the deliverables are. So we talked about like LEILA 1, LEILA 2, LEILA 3. And all of this is part of like understanding the priorities. So one thing that I always find really useful is, like I said, there's always lots of great ideas, but just understanding like how important those ideas are, and this idea of a must-have versus a nice-to-have. So we can talk about, for example, a search engine, and okay, is the search engine like essential? Is this like, do we absolutely have to have this, or would it just be like a nice addition? And if it's just nice, then maybe it goes into like the second version. And ideally here, at the end of the meeting, we'll have a list of priorities, and they will be ordered by priority. So what we can do is we can look down this list, and we can say, okay, we need the catalogue, we need the about section, we need the mailing list, and it would be quite nice to have like an FAQ, or it would be quite nice to have this, and we can just look down and go, okay, this is the line we go for the first version, and this is everything that's essential, and everything else is nice to have for the next version. Here we go. Yeah, I talked a little bit about changes. So changes are inevitable. Like we can never be 100% sure of what we want, but the idea is to try and minimize these changes, because the later on we find about these things during the project, the more difficult it is to accommodate those changes. I think I've talked about this already. So what is the time scale? MVP, so MVP is a minimum viable product. It's basically what is the minimum amount of functionality we can have for the client to be satisfied. And so the client here is you, but the client here is also the end user. So it's the person who will be using the website. So what would that end user be looking for in order to be satisfied with the product and be able to say, okay, this is something I can use every day. And then finally, this is also something that we need to talk about in terms of the external dependencies. What I mean by that is like, where is all this data coming from? So we've got a catalogue of works of literature. Are these coming from an external partner? Potentially several external partners? How do they give us the data? Is there someone who's going to be typing this in manually? How do we deal with corrections? The more external partners there are, the more that increases complexity. So we talked also about having different sources of data, and that can be like an Excel spreadsheet, or it can be a PDF, all these things there. But all these extra external dependencies, they add complexity. So again, just being clear about the importance of these different things, and making sure that we're prioritizing our time and our resources to make sure that everything that we get into this initial version is really the sort of stuff that the clients and the users are really going to be wanting to use. So that's, I think, we're done. Yes, so that's basically, for me, like I can talk a lot more about how we could potentially implement this stuff, but at the moment, you know, this is still open for discussion. So I wanted to just talk about the kind of like the most kind of structural things about how this sort of project will be organized, so that if tomorrow we're talking about something and I'm always saying, well, is this a must-have or a nice-to-have, and then we can argue about it for like maybe 5 minutes and decide like who thinks it's important, and we'll negotiate a little bit about what the different functionalities are. But this is for me the most important part to assure the success of the project, is making sure that we can, or at least I can manage these risks as we go. So I hope that's useful. Yeah. We can get back to the important stuff now.
No, it's perfect, because Samsa is going to talk to us about how we can best serve publishers, right? Which will be, they'll be part of the client base, or the audience. The users. So
if I can say a word about Samsa, because you weren't here this morning when we introduced everyone. So Samsa, or maybe you did it.
I actually heard it. I was online, so I heard you. Okay. So okay. I know all about you, but you don't know me.
And we also start with this discussion about the different expectations of publishers in the different countries, etc. We start also with this before the other question on the target audiences, because Samsa has a plane later today. So we start with this discussion about what are the expectations of publishers, and also their different levels of knowledge, information, markets, etc. Thank you.
Are we ready to move on?
Yes, we're ready to move you on to the stage.
Okay.
You're asking, right?
Stop to share this like the web avatar.
Right.
Yes. I think we go back to several.
Perfect. If anyone has any questions, I'm here for.
I just wanted to have a small question. You mentioned earlier that maybe we have to clarify whether we want the website to be suitable for a mobile phone or not. But isn't it like essential to have the website for mobile because of SEO and the latest requirements?
I mean, that's the question. For me, normally, yes, but it totally depends on who the end user is, and you can always access a non-mobile website on a mobile phone. If the reality is that most people using this website are going to be sitting in an office with a laptop, then that's just a debate we have to have. And I'm assuming that it would need to be like responsive or mobile friendly. But for SEO, it's not really that much of an issue, because it depends. It's long and complicated, but that was just an example of one of the things we need to consider. But yes, I agree. I'm assuming that it should be mobile friendly.
Very good. Thank you. Interesting to delve into some technical stuff, like thinking about all these things. So yes, thank you for the morning session already, which I didn't say anything because I was actually in the train on the way over here from Auvergne. So, but I was listening to you, and it was really interesting. So my name is Samsa Peltonen, as Lucien said, and I'm one of the 9 translators who were in Arles in the LEILA residency seminar for a week in Arles. Imagine LEILA as it became our like group name. And myself, I'm a translator from Arabic and French mostly to Finnish. So I work in Finland, and as almost all of the participants in our of the mezzanine, we're all slashing between different sorts of jobs. You know, quite. I don't know if anyone really of us was actually just working as a literary translator. This obviously just boils down to the nature of the work and the remuneration of the work and all those questions. I alongside this literary translation, I mainly work for the media in Finland, for the like publicly funded television Finnish broadcasting company. But I think my case, as was that of almost everyone in the LEILA project in Arles, that the literary translation is really like a very important part of our professional profile for the heart and for the soul. And a huge thanks to all the organizers of this project. It was a really great experience. So I'm bringing you some greetings from our residency. And just one thing I want to say, just so that you know that this project is actually like going ahead and already has reached some very immediate benefits. And well, we were the lucky ones who were in Arles to reap the immediate benefit of just getting to know each other. And we really realized that all of us, although we're all sort of seasoned professionals, we've all worked in literary translation from Arabic for a number of years. But we all, more or less, even in the bigger countries, work pretty much alone, especially when compared to translators from, say, English or French or the big Central European languages, for example, who usually always have colleagues who translate from those languages and who they might have workshops that are like particularly designed for those languages, whereas for Arabic translators, this is usually not the case. And for example, myself coming from Finland and then our colleague from Slovenia, Barbara, we're actually, you could almost say, the only translators in our country from Arabic to our native. So just to give you an idea of what kind of different editorial publishing cultures there are in Europe and within this project. And that's already sort of states a big challenge for anything that we do, ranging from, say, France, or let me say French, the French language, and the English language. We still do count the English as a European language. They obviously have basically like almost all of the big classics translated into that language, and they have a huge selection of contemporary titles as well. And then there are countries, smaller countries and smaller languages. Finnish, there are 5 million Finnish speakers. Slovenian, she said, I think there was something like 3 million speakers. So very small book markets, but very curious ones. But also such cultures that just for the reason of the smallness, the small scale, have really big shortcomings. For example, in like really important classics not having been translated to these languages. But so this network phenomenon took place right away from day one in Arles. And we all found it very enriching and really important to be able to be in touch with colleagues. And I'm really hoping to see this, to bear fruit in whatever future endeavors we have in the context of this LEILA project. And I would really encourage, such exchange to, or that it would be given opportunities to take place also in future, because I really think that like as some sort of a network of expertise, it's really good to put all these very different profiles from different countries together. So we represented a huge variety of translators with very different profiles, also very different profiles in Arabic, because of course, as we know, such a huge area, and it was interesting to see the sort of geographic répartition, like distribution of our little group. And I think this is something that will be reflected also then, in whatever services we can sort of propose to suggest to publishers or other sort of end users of this LEILA network. And all these, so we represented like very different profiles as translators, but also, of course, our contacts to publishing houses and different editorial landscapes. I think this could really be the force of LEILA, whatever we call it, site and network and everything. We all, of course, all have been looking at what Marshall Swaley has been, who talked this morning, has been doing in English. And I think it sets a good example, and then like a way to really do something different and like find a different resources and different forces would be this variety. When we were thinking about, of course, I'm now talking about publishers from a very sort of, not from a publishing house point of view, but from a translator's point of view, but usually translators from less frequently translated languages such as Arabic. As translators, we often work as scouts and like informants for the publishers, and they very often ask us for all sorts of recommendations. And so our findings when we were talking about these issues together was that, well, one finding is already the huge difference between different countries, and I think it would be very important and a big sort of force of LEILA that it would not only concentrate on what already exists in French and English, because there's so much already, but also would like try to gear all this information towards other countries and other languages as well. And it also would like if we're thinking about the whatever number of titles or authors, be it 50 or 100 as has been suggested, and would already make the task a bit easier, that you could already also have quite a number of titles that exist in French and English, and there are loads of articles on these translations and reviews and all this, and then we could find a way of just by presenting these works to other languages. It can be done. Well, it doesn't mean that everything has to be translated to all the EU languages. We've never had the resources, obviously, to do that. But for example, just like two big European languages already, most publishers in even the smaller countries, like in any case, follow the fields in English and French and German, for example. We thought that usually the way publishers approach us, translators, when they're looking for interesting titles, the way they asked the questions made us think that it would be really important to have a good search function on the site, like for the catalogue of books or authors' titles presented, because usually the way they will ask us the question will be like, okay, we would be really interested in like some book from these 3 countries, and very often these expectations are kind of sadly not maybe very sort of literature driven. So they're not only looking for like really good books, but of course they are trying to find marketable books as well. And in many cases, this is of course linked to the history of immigration in all these countries. That's why, for example, in my case in Finland, publishers would be quite keen to find Iraqi names and Iraqi books, because that's the biggest country of immigration for Finland right now, like the last wave of immigrations, if you want to call it that, was mainly from Iraq. And then in other countries, you know, they might sort of be looking more into like whatever countries that have some sort of ties to their culture. And then they usually will have some specification also to the genres that they are looking for. That, for example, that okay, right now we are not looking for short stories, but we really want novels. That's the usual story, because novels are usually the most marketable books in Europe. And then, of course, there is nowadays also the culture of sort of cocher de case, like ticking boxes in a way, so that certain types of author profiles, for example, might be a bit more sort of wanted. So I think this search for function would be very very important. We're obviously talking a lot about representativity from the point of view of like book lovers and lovers of Arabic books, because we all read much, like many more books than we get to translate, obviously, and then we've got our own coup de cœur, the books that we just find really great. And we're also thinking that and this seems to be a common feeling also amongst us translators, that what comes to the sort of profile of books, novels, for example, that could be presented on the site, that seems to be a bit of a tendency of seeing Arabic contemporary literature as very highbrow, sort of like they only select these like really sort of like a very particular type of books. But we were also thinking that it would be great to see a broader spectrum of books, and we're actually even thinking like there are just millions of these like romantic l'eau de rose kind of romantic novels in Arabic, and yeah, they're maybe not great literature, like great world literature, but like how great would it to be able to translate just a couple of books, just to show that, you know,
Harlequin sells very well.
kind of like even almost Harlequin, or then a bit more of science fiction, or for example these whodunits, detective books that are actually really marketable nowadays. And there's this whole thing about the Nordic noir, very fashionable right now. It would be so great to see a bit more variety, like not only you know, the book that predicted the Egyptian revolution, or this is the book that really epitomizes the suffering of women or whatever oppressed minorities, or this and that, or the war-torn country, or this and that. It would be really refreshing also to get to see, you know, like some pretty ordinary big public or big audience, wider audience books like crime novels and romance and stuff like that. So I think this would might also be a way of sort of like creating something a bit special that I don't think really any other actors out there would really be able to present. And one of the ideas, I'm kind of like throwing these ideas into there, and I'm really hoping that your questions will be sort of somehow more organized than my ramblings. And I really hope that you will ask questions, because as was said, I need to, like, at some point just go away and go and take my evening flight back to Finland. But yes, so for the sort of organizing of the site and the catalog of the titles that could be proposed, also one idea was that there would be this sort of core group, maybe of the sort of LEILA seal of approval translators, this network, who could also, like, when they have the sort of official presentation, the more formal presentation of a said author or book, that it would be great if we could also, the way they do it in good bookshops here in France, especially, they have these coup de cœur de libraire, like they got this, that this is a book that we really love, so that the translators could maybe put a little personal note saying that, yeah, I read this book and I actually really enjoyed this and this aspect of it. I think this would also somehow give a bit of a more, like, there would be the institutional side to it, of course, that would be very sort of organized, but then, give some sort of personal input as well. And we were quite, well, actually, this is basically, then I think we should move on.
It would be a great time. Thank you so much to open it up to the floor and discuss, maybe bouncing off on some of your ideas. Lucienne, did you want to say a word?
Yes, maybe a word, because I thought that you won't be with us more, but maybe you can join us also remotely tomorrow, because there will be a time tomorrow to discuss more about the selection in the catalog. It's tomorrow afternoon that we thought of discussing more about the selection itself, and also about the editorial committee. But it's great that you presented the ideas that you translators had together. So I think for the discussion now, we should mainly go back to what you started with, which was more about the publishers and the difference of approach. And there is not much time to discussion, but nothing will be decided upon like in a dictatorial way. But I think we wanted to bring up a discussion to say that the website should be conscious, if a website has a conscience, but that we should be conscious that not all publishers have a knowledge such as French publishers or English publishers to start with, and that we should target European publishers as a whole. So we'll have to find a way to feature the information in a way that a publisher can know that this is where I go to general information about the history of Arabic literature, or about description of the field in detective novels, or this or that. Like, there should be a way on the website then for prospective publisher. I'm speaking of her because we wanted to invite her and she couldn't come. An example is Zulma of the indie publishers, like Pierre Astier was mentioning earlier today. And she told me, Laura, she said, no, but I cannot come, but I want to say some things because we kind of have expectations to your website. And so a French independent publisher will tell us, we will be like evaluating LEILA, of course, at the selection and at what kind of voices you will bring to us. So there is obviously a kind of expectation that is a very pointu or elitist, highbrow expectation of indies, etc. And then there is the fact that we're an EU-sponsored project, and that we also want to kind of fill a gap for countries that you mentioned where nothing has been translated yet. So I don't know to whom, how can this happen in our website, or how can we do that to have different entries or approaches because not all publishers have the same expectations and then the same knowledge, knowledge to start with, etc.
And depending on the country, the publishers will want certain things. For example, you were saying in Finland there are Iraqi refugees, but I mean in Germany it's going to be Syrian.
Yes.
And other places, I don't know, Italy or Spain. Yeah. Maghreb.
Yes, and then also, so then we can open on the main topics that bring us really back to the website design. Is also what you said about the research tool. So in LEILA 1, there won't be a need to have like already the research tool to, I don't know, maybe we should link to Arabic for now, to the research by country of writing, etc. Because the only selection who will come up within LEILA 1 will be the catalog. So the catalog will speak a little bit about it more, then we'll come up with a cahier des charges to the translators and with Al-Jumhuriya as well, who will be part of the process. But so we will have links towards existing selections such as Banipal, the Arab Writers Union, Arab Voices, the hot list of the Alliance. I mean, we will link to a list of selections, of list of Kidlit, etc. And we will have our catalog, but you don't need to have a very strong research tool to research in a catalog of 50 titles. So then you like to have like cross entries, etc. But the question of the research tool and how to be able to look for a country of writing for genre, etc. This will be more a LEILA 2 kind of issue, but that will also be discussed here already. So this is the way I'm just trying to bring it back to the issues that are like what and how do we put things on the web.
I mean, since the website is still not or something, I think you should think about the essential parts that can be developed before. And my question is, in the future, now it will be only English.
Yes.
It will be in other languages. LEILA 2 will be in Arabic.
It's a great question. In Arabic, I don't think so, because it will be like we're targeting European professionals for the reasons that they don't read Arabic. So I don't think Arabic would ever be a language of the website. But for other languages, we already even discussed it with Gareth, because some of the contents we will link to, like one of our assumptions is that European publishers mainly don't speak Arabic, but most of them speak more than one European language. So we thought that it would also be of interest to link to resources that are there in Spanish or in other languages, even if we don't have the funds to translate all the contents that into English to start with, but into all the European languages. So the whole thing will be that we will introduce in English to the links and resources in other European languages that we would like to feature. And then there will be these questions about, is there a way to access, like for a Spanish publisher who wants to go to all the Spanish content of the website or that is linked to, is there a way, you know what I mean, like to go and look up for all the content that is linked to in Spanish or in German or in Czech, or like this will be a question. But whatever content creation, it will all be in English.
Is that fairly easy to
So there's two different parts here. There's the actual interface of the website, and any like static content, so something like about us or anything like that. And then there's the dynamic part, which would be the actual catalog. So translating the interface of the website, so the buttons on the menu, anything like that, is fairly easy. Afterwards, translating the content is something we need to discuss about. It's not something you mentioned about like how would you want to search, and you mentioned like by title, by author, by subject, or by genre, or by country of origin, that sort of thing. So those are things that it would be interesting and important to understand what sort of search criteria people would want to use. And so I noted those 4 or 5 there. If there are any others, so like we talked about maybe like tagging by subject, if it's like I'm really excited to find out about like Arabic science fiction, for example. But just knowing what the search criteria would be, And that's the first thing, and that's something that needs to be translated, because if someone searches for like 1001 Nights, it's not the same as searching for Mille et une Nuits. So how would we take an Arabic work of literature and then translate that into either English or potentially like five other languages?
And the spelling as well, like Muhammad, how many ways can you spell Muhammad and how to find it?
I mean, that was my point when I was talking about language, and also asking, okay, why Arabic? If you were talking before that maybe authors could find a way to get into agents through these projects, why Arabic authors should know English? Maybe they can have an interface where they can log in, ask for help, or I don't know, match with an agent that is suitable for them. The agent who's supposed to speak Arabic, of course, have access to Arabic. So that's the point. I don't see that it has to be a whole web page in Arabic, but as is a project about the Arab world, some part should be present in Arabic. But if you're thinking about developing this idea that was this morning, that maybe could be a point of connection directly between authors and agents, or maybe authors and foreign publishers, maybe it should be. And the other question was exactly the spelling. Not only about, I mean, if we have some authors and we want to do this list of other languages, how we, Italian, Finland, I guess is the same, do the spelling of the names. Well, it's a big discussion. We are not fanat, we are very, let's say, extremist in this issue of Spanish translations. Then you have some discussion with the authors, how you do it, what you do. I mean, that's part that I think it should be also a discussion into the project of what type of transcription you use. Maybe to make a list of authors and all this, as you say, different type of ways to find them. Also in Spanish,
that you changed the
same Darwish we were talking after the last translator. She decided that she wanted to put it with X. And Mahmoud Darwish was so happy with her. Now you have Darwish with an X.
Even this before for Spain, we have a discussion. Because it's in the, the actual world, English and reading. I am from the academic. Then we have a discussion, because of course we have to find international translation, Fédération, but at the same time you have to respect how the authors, not even in the diaspora, even in their countries, they translate their names. Then how you will find a criteria for LEILA, I think is one of the important steps to beginning.
But many of them don't get, they're so used to having their names changed, I don't know how many times.
But they don't like it.
Yeah, but they're not.
They don't care.
They're like,
No,
it depends on
they care.
No, but they write their names, I'm sorry. We write their names in different, way. But they have their own,
of course,
way
in Arabic.
To translate, not only in Arabic, to translate their names, because they are authors. Even they are person, but also they are authors. Then, to find the common criteria with their own style of each personality, person, and author, and the international translation code for all of us.
Yeah, and also with people that has not been translated.
There was some, before, I want to say something, but
somewhere. Yes, so we give back the word to Richard in a bit. Sama was writing, and I think she's right, because here it is. Because Petro, what you were suggesting is something like even more than expanding the target crowd of the website to Arab authors. It's not in the scope. Like we are really targeting European professionals from the beginning, because then it would be like a completely different project.
Yes,
also have information available in Arabic.
So Yasmina.
It was talking this morning.
So what
Do you want me to read out what
Yes,
she said?
yes,
So,
yes.
so it's someone is saying English is the language of rights negotiations. All foreign rights agents and foreign rights acquisition editors count on English and exchange in English. So for the other languages, the other languages are not really a priority. Concerning Arabic, no need for information in Arabic, but the search tool should be able to read Arabic because the author's name in Arabic is the reference. If an author has been published in German and English, his name isn't written the same way. Okay, that's what we were saying. So the Arabic could link the different spellings in different languages. So Gareth, what magic can you do?
So just to understand, just to understand what that says is no need for information in Arabic, but the search tool should be able to read Arabic.
So if the name is written in Arabic, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So that would mean you would search for like Muhammad and it would.
In Arabic?
In Arabic.
Yeah.
But who would be writing? Who would be searching in Arabic if our targets are European?
I don't know. You could ask LEILA, but
I think what she means, and it makes sense, is that okay, if you introduce a category in the website author, okay, and then in the same category you have several languages, and one of them maybe you can prioritize. Say the Arabic is the one who will unify all of them, because maybe sometimes you cannot match this, it's the same, but the one who will unify is the original name.
So she's saying, yeah, that maybe you can have the Arabic name near the name written in
So
Latin characters. Yeah.
That's basically we can build this tool. What that means is that someone has to be in charge of the editorial content. So it means that the tool will be built with an article or with a entry in the database for each book, but it can't magically decide that Darwish is like with an X in Spanish or something. So there will be an editorial role for someone to go in and write Muhammad, whatever, and add that content. And there are also tools to be able to say. So you said like a Khaled is spelled different in German. So there are tools also to be able to say, okay, like this word also matches this word and this word and that word, but that's also something that needs to be done manually. We can't, like, unless you want to start talking about like machine learning or something, but we can't automatically do that.
The search result will be in Arabic. Unifying. Yes, that's.
Yeah, so hi Yasmina, everybody. Yasmina Raisati, who is in Lebanon. Yeah. Anyway, she'll be joining us later and giving us a presentation. And then I think Richard had a question.
Yes, I have a question. It's a very question about it's part of what Hamza was saying about the list of books that will be presented. I don't know if it's the right moment for me to ask this question. It's the question about is it a really highbrow and elite thing, or is it the purpose to present a wider scope of Arabic writing to the European publishers?
This is a real question.
Is the question still open, or is it already decided, or is there something in LEILA 1 and LEILA 2?
No, I'll tell you where the question is standing because it's an important question. When the translators started like to have a round table in all to compare like who would come to their mind, like what had been translated or in very few languages and should be translated, etc. I think you came up with the elite highbrow list for like Zulma. But at the same time, they kept saying like, this is like unforgivable, that in Greece, this author has never been translated. So we have still to parameter our approach with the translators. Because as said, like the first idea of LEILA was to have a 100 titles catalog where only one section would be like a small section would be the translator selection. And then we noticed that we won't have time to establish like this perfect board of Euro-Arab jury, you know, that to scout the 100 titles and have samples of translation into every language. So we thought we would have as a base the translators work on the selection. And then integrate in the editorial committee through Al Jumhuriya also Arab critics experts so that it's in a dialogue. And then about the contents, we will, because then when we got back to our partners in LEILA consortium who in Arab, they also said, yes, we agree that it would be mainly the translator's selection, but we want a certain representativity in genres and that all the countries are represented, etc. So we will have internal discussions and all that and come up with a kind of cahier des charges for the work of the translators, the number of titles, what we would like as LEILA in terms of representativity, etc., etc. But I think we still can consider that the real creation will be the, I don't know, half of it at least, or the 30 titles that would be really like the kind of elite. I think we can assume this kind of highbrow selection once, because there are already a lot of selections existing, like that we will be linking to through the website. And then also because it's independent publishers, as we described, that might be the first ones, like what is the new selection proposed, etc. But of course, with the unforgivable list as well. And it was all the discussions that we wanted to open up and have, and as well a kind of statement in the apropos section about LEILA, that we are not, even if our catalog will reflect like the new generation of translators' preferences and scouting, etc., to innovative voices, etc. We, as a whole, LEILA, and be it LEILA 1 or LEILA 2, we are in this elitist approach. You know that in this will be the catalog with also rattrapage, with the unforgivable, etc. But the other lists that we will be linking to, and then also later on the tools we will develop, the authors, etc. We don't want to say that commercial literature, or what Samsa was saying about detective, romantic, etc., that this has no, we don't leave them aside. It will be part of what we want to reflect, that we want to reflect the diversity, and richness, etc. But that we will somehow try, because we are between, we have with us the experts of Arabic language, etc., that of course we will still be trying to have a difference between goods and bad. You know what I mean? Like be it on the database of experts, translators, on everything like that, we will try to only promote good literature, be it commercial, be it avant-garde, be it this, you know what I mean? This was all the question we wanted to have about the statement, because even if the translator selection seems to go to a highbrow scouting of new names, etc., we don't want to be only that. We also want to have. Sorry?
The new doesn't exist if there is no.
Yes, exactly. So the unforgivable, those never translated even from modern literature and all that, it's also a concern that we also tackle these issues.
So you would feature untranslated.
Not only.
Yeah, but that's.
You mean
if you say untranslated literature, untranslated into which language?
Yes.
So this is
exactly. This is why I say not only. Like in your list, there were titles.
Yeah, like for example, I think the unforgivable, because we started talking about the unforgivables when I think it came when I mentioned that in Finnish they for some reason never translated Al-Tayyib Saleh's Mawsim al-Hijra, which for me is like a huge unforgivable act. So we realized that there are actually quite a few of like really important seminal works of contemporary or more or less contemporary Arabic fiction, and that they are translated to many European languages, but not all. And so we really wanted to include a couple of those as well. That really should be like that like any speakers of all languages would have like the right to read such a book. So we were, and as I was saying, this could be really the richness of this LEILA project, to be able to include such books that are already very known, to speakers of English and French and German and Spanish and Italian probably, but then there are quite a number of us smaller countries that for whatever historical reasons have not translated such a book. And I think for the sort of highbrow thing, I think it would be more interesting to try to really think about just good books. And I think good can be, a book can be good in so many different ways. Also, for example, just that it represents really well a certain type of literature, and I think it would be really interesting, you know, for many readers to find out what sort of kiosk literature looks like in Egypt. You know, and it can be sort of poor from a very purely literary point of view, but it can be very interesting from the point of view of how it depicts like stereotypes or just like gives a representation of or new viewpoint to what gets to be published in Arabic.
I just wanted to say very quickly, getting back to the transliteration, I see that Yasmina said that perhaps a solution would be to add the ISNI number, which is the author unique identifier, so that the problem of names spelled in different ways would be resolved. I don't know how many of you, I didn't know there was an ISNI, but I get the sense of
the issue is that you still need to know the spelling, so like if someone is searching.
No, we need that.
Yeah.
Do all books have
I
don't know.
authors. ISNI is like the equivalent of ISBN.
But it's for an author.
Books have not.
All others.
I think Kenza has the answer.
I have also a question in order to think about a more inclusive project. When Sarah writes, she's right to say that English is the language of the agents. In Maghreb mainly, a lot of publishers don't have good English.
Yeah.
So we have to think outside the websites, the tool, in order to make them exist. The second point is that in Morocco, less than a third of the publisher have websites. So what do you do with the others? It doesn't mean that their work is not respectable and shouldn't be taken in consideration. We have to think about this. Thing. I guess maybe we all agree about the fact that we should represent books published in publishing houses and not the self-published books, which represent in Morocco more than the third. Between the fourth and the third of every year's publishing. So
that's an interesting fact, because in France even you have self-published books that then are published by established publishing houses.
And if we want to have a good idea of the Moroccan kiosk, maybe we should include, but maybe this is not what we would like to translate and to have translated, books about sorcery or a cook. Well, maybe we should choose the literary fields we want to have represented, because in Morocco a lot of books are concern religious issues. Dreams interpretation, cooking, sorcery. Okay, is that what we want to translate?
No, but I think like as much as there are some questions we're raising now that really need discussion and debate, etc., there are other questions that we made the decision some time ago when we submitted our application, is that first we're focusing on fiction. The whole LEILA project is only focusing on fiction. Then the target group of the website are European book professionals, and the question is, should we extend it to cultural operators to bring back the subject? Because you're mentioning the Arab authors, etc., but they are not the target groups. I mean, exactly as
we was a really open idea.
Yes, but exactly as we include the orientation of work with the literary translators from Arabic. Also, the website is not for them, you know what I mean? Like, we have our way of LEILA working with the translators. We can have our way, given the issues that were raised with chaîre this morning, to have some discussions with the Arab authors, etc. It still doesn't mean that the discoverability tool of Arabic literature that we're creating will be targeting the Arab authors, and that it should also be in Arabic. You know what I mean? Like, and the fact that English is the main language of the website is also kind of decided upon, because the means of the whole project would have been like really different if there was a lot of content that exists to be translated in all the European languages, etc. And to go back to Kenza, when you say that some of the publishing houses in the Arab-speaking region don't have websites. Yes, but we also don't have the idea that we will be a citothèque, like a kind of annuaire, just linking to website of publishers in the Arab region. It's not at all what we are going to do. We want it to link to publishing houses who do have websites. I mean, it can be, this is something that should be discussed,
eventually,
like tomorrow in the content that we should make available and centralized on the website for European publishers. It can be a question, should we put links to 10 major publishing
goes
houses?
into what Gareth said, what's nice to have and what do you need, right?
Should we put links to the book fairs? No, I mean, it's also, it could be in LEILA 1 because it's not difficult to establish a list of websites of our publishers, but do we want to do that? For now, we more had in mind like to put tools online.
And back to English, Yasmina has a further note that the Emirates Literature Foundation, which she's working with, is now an ISNI registration agency, and they're working to attribute ISNIs to Arab authors using their Arabic and ideally one English spelling for their name.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Yes,
but it's interesting she says one English spelling because it's true there's.
Can't Yasmina talk yet? I have the impression she's muted because it's when we talked with Yasmina.
I don't know.
I went to check the ISNI after our discussion because I didn't know anything about it. I went to the ISNI website.
Yasmina, tu peux unmute. Si, voilà.
I didn't want to interrupt. Sorry. So hello everyone. Thank you for having me. Sorry for my joining late. I'm still in the mountain actually, and but so anyway, as you can see from my background, if you're familiar with Lebanese homes. So regarding ISNI, because I've been very fascinated with the whole metadata aspect of things ever since I started working on the website Tada Khabar, about which I'll be talking later. And within my interaction with Éditeurs, which is the organism based in the UK who are developing these standards, they are the ones who told me about ISNI when I was telling them about the project that the Emirates Literature Foundation had back in Dubai. And basically the way ISNI works is exactly as Louise was saying, is that Lucien, is that it's like ISBN numbers, but for authors. So the author being, of course, the public persona. So if you're an author with a pseudonym and your real name, the pseudonym gets an ISNI and your other name gets another ISNI. And the whole purpose of ISNI is to disambiguate author identity online or on any records. And so now some publishers are actually using ISNI even on the published books. But for digital, tools, it's obviously very important. So the way this works is that when an author, let's say, appears on Wikipedia with an ISNI or on a different website, then you have a linked databases that will function, because basically all of these will go back to the ISNI database, which will link things together. Ultimately, you have in the ISNI database, for example, let's say the 15 spellings of Dostoevsky, and so you know that all of the Dostoevskys are all actually the same person through the ISNI. And Arabic has kind of the same problem, because we can sometimes include the L or not, like for example, Habib Salmi or Al Habib As Salmi, which in transliteration can cause a problem if you're searching for it. So this is why I thought it was relevant here. And so currently what the Literature Foundation is doing is that they're trying to increase, their main goal is to increase the number of Wikipedia pages dedicated to Arab authors, in both in English and Arabic. And in parallel of that, I suggested, and the foundation was very happy with this idea, they are becoming, or they have become, a registration agency. And so they are attributing ISNIs to authors. So this is a costly, actually, transaction, let's say. Anytime you want to add an ISNI number to an author, you have to send a request to the agency, and then each request costs something like, I think, a bit below €1. Of course, for one author, it's nothing, but if you're working with databases of thousands of authors, it becomes a budget. But anyway, so, sorry?
I just didn't hear how much, €1 per author?
So it depends. So each agency can have its own how do you say, pricing policy, depending on the cost they need to cover. But typically, if you use the let's say, there are several ways. If you send batches to the agency, or if you do this through the website, it varies. If you do this through the website, it's below €1. So anywhere between 1.10 to 1.50 cents, I would presume. But if you send batches, then it depends on the volume of the batch. And I think the Emirates Foundation is still figuring out what the pricing should be for it to make sense to them. But so it's not that much if you think of a single author basis. It becomes more costly if you're thinking of huge databases. But I think there are a lot of converging points with what LEILA is doing and what the foundation is doing at different levels. But maybe it would be interesting at some point for me to put you in touch and to see how on that front of things you can perhaps collaborate when it comes to at least the visibility of these authors online. Maybe only, I mean, I mean, I want to say in French, ne serait-ce que, even if it's just on the ISNI number front of things. Like, for example, if it turns out they have these numbers, you can look at their database and, you know, use them. If you want to add authors that don't have a number, then you can maybe request for numbers through them or something. So anyway, but I don't know if I clarified how ISNI kind of work, but I'm, you know, happy to take further questions. To answer that.
How does this work technically? Does it mean that on the search tool, persons have to go and look for the ISNI number?
So there's a couple of issues. Well, first of all, it's an interesting potential solution. The issues I have, or the questions I would have with this, is that first of all, Yasmina, you mentioned that not all authors are currently in the system, which means that there's going to be authors that aren't there. Which then asks the question, like, what do we do? Like, we have a book from an author who isn't currently in the database, so then we have to.
Can we insert her, maybe?
That's another question. There's first of all, there's the fact that sometimes these authors might not exist, which means that we're going to have another system to manage the fact that in some cases they don't exist and potentially add them. Also, it sounds like this database is being updated regularly, so it means that we're going to have a system to query the database regularly and get that information back and integrate it. Those are, and the fact that it's an external partner means that it's also extra complexity, because it means there's this synchronization of data with those two things, and then synchronization of the data from the database with the works. To make sure that that stays in sync. So
yeah, but I mean, when it comes to databases, I mean, this is a living organism, right? It's not like you're going to have one set database and that's it. And it's the same for SNI, it's the same for Wikipedia, it's the same for all of these projects that are similar in the sense these things grow. So yes, obviously, the point is basically if let's say you have an author. And it could be interesting to analyze. And I'm not saying it should be. I'm saying it's just a possible option if it's useful for the specific project. So I'm not like pushing it. I'm just bringing this up and just trying to see if it's worth it. But just to clarify, let's say you have an author that you want to add. You can quickly check. You cannot, if you're not a registration agency. You don't have a direct connection with the ISNI. That's the whole point of having agencies between the central ISNI and the individual. Like, unless you become a registration agency, this is when you can request an attribution. So the relationship that you would have with ISNI is different than the one that the foundation has. So what you would do is you could use the tool of the foundation and just send a request through their website, and then they would provide you with these numbers. If you have a budget for it, I don't think they can provide them for free, because it costs them as well. And so then you would go. So yes, as you would say, you'd have to enrich the database with these numbers as you go. So it's certainly a work that's it's extra work for sure, and it's progressive for sure. So it does add a layer of complexity, but I think it's a manual thing. Unless you want to go via like APIs as well. I don't know if the website at the beginning on the Literature Foundation side is ready for something like that either.
I guess my question would be about the functionality. It's kind of parallel to this discussion, but it's necessary to understand how this will be used. Is that, let's say you're looking for a certain work and you do a search by the title or something, and you arrive on a certain book. Are we expecting that you could then click on the author and see the author's kind of profile page, and there would be a profile page with all the works by that author? That's something that I'm assuming that's expected. Okay. So what that means is that we need some kind of key that uniquely identifies that author. At the moment we're talking about maybe like 50 or 100 works in the initial version.
Yes, exactly.
So it's something that I don't think we need to build some kind of API that will go and.
Yes, I also think that is for the version that will be.
What that means is that assuming that we have a budget for these requests, then that would be part of the manual step of entering an author into the system would be going to a form, entering a title, entering the publisher, entering a description or whatever, and then clicking on a link that would then go to the external websites, doing a search for the author, finding their particular reference, and then manually editing, adding the information into
This is what we should do, or this is what anyone visiting the website?
No, this is what someone who is adding a work to the database should do.
Okay.
So that's because we can automate this, and we can say, okay, like for a certain work of fiction, then we'll do an automatic query to the database, get back all the records, and then click on the one that's on the matches, and it automatically filled in. But that seems like a lot of extra work. If it's going to be 50 books, and then or 50 or 100 books, let's say, and it's just a question of like clicking on a link, going to their database, cutting and pasting the list of alternative spellings. If that's what we think is, if we think that the quality of this data is acceptable or better than what we'll get from other sources, because there's still this question of are all the others going to be in there? Because as it's a work in progress, if we build this functionality around this expectation that all the authors will be in this database, and then we find out that only maybe like 60 or 70 or 80% of them actually are, then that's going to cause a problem, because what you do when you get an author that isn't in the database.
Yes. We can link both with like, because we know not all the authors have an IS9 number, we could still keep the Arabic as a sort of reference language as now was suggesting. And knowing that eventually we'll hope that everyone has a nice number.
I mean, that's definitely a possibility, but as I say, that's extra complexity.
Yeah.
So it's something like we need to decide if the quality of this database is better than the quality we'll get from somewhere else, and if we're willing to accept that cost of having to manage authors both from this source of data and potentially also from our own source of data. That's just a question. I can't answer that question, but if you think it's worth the extra cost of the development of doing that, then it's definitely.
We can make contact with this Emirates Literature Foundation, because if it somehow is also engaged to do it, like, you know what I mean, like to work together with them on this referencing of Arab authors, still for us it will always be manageable, the number of authors and the length of the process of adding them. So if it is manageable, then we will do it together with them, I think. And then also it's something like very bricolé, I think, but if on the search tool, we also, since English is a reference language of our website, we can also say that the English language spelling of the Arabic names is the reference. A lot of people know that it would be SH and not CH, like in French, etc. And we can also have a short note saying that if you're looking for a name, also try it with SH or CH or E and I mean, some little things we get. And also, I don't think that a lot of European publishers would be researching through Arab names. So, you know what I mean? I think they would be researching by genre or by this or this. So I don't think in the end it's the biggest problem.
So just to summarize, if I can just make some notes. So what we're saying is that all authors have a generally accepted default English spelling of their name that is the one that should be used, and different authors would have different ones, but we can use the IRNA database to find that default spelling. And so whoever's inputting the data into the database would have this as a resource, and then they can use that default spelling which is defined on this website. And if it's not defined, then it's basically an external tool for the editors or the curators of the data to use, but the system doesn't need to know anything about that, because it's source of data, like the source of data of the books, that will be used to populate the database.
But bibliographical search tool, I think, for bibliography, for libraries, catalogs, etc.
In what way, sorry?
The ISNI.
Yeah.
I think the application is more like ISBN. It's more in the professional databases of libraries, of publishing. I mean, I don't think that like we would use it as users, the code.
Yeah. But as it, sorry.
I checked it now on the net, and it's fascinating because it's used in every library catalog.
Yes.
So you can check your own name. I checked my name. I checked that Nikki Mahfouz is fascinating because
they're all the
like
same.
200
Yes.
spellings of Nikki
Yes.
Mahfouz.
And the British Library and the Bibliothèque Nationale de France are very much in the the advisory board. Yes.
I have a question. So some websites have the search tool is like smart enough to kind of understand what you want to say and give you the correct name.
Yeah.
So for instance, Goodreads doesn't have it, but Amazon will always ask you, did you mean this, and give you the right name. Can we just teach the search tool to get it and then put the name like with the default way? And
the way that works, the way that I assume works, and there was an example from Google back like 15, 20 years ago for Britney Spears, and they showed all the different spellings of Britney. And the way that works is that people spell Britney wrong, and then Google says, did you mean Britney? And if people click on that link, it means that it's accepted spelling, and that's basically a spelling mistake. The problem with that is you need like thousands and thousands and thousands of users to teach the system. So we have to, like, if we can do that, if we're going to assume that we're going to have thousands and thousands of people making those mistakes, and that's probably why Goodreads doesn't do it and Amazon does, because Amazon has the traffic to do that. So I think like you say, like there's that example there, there's maybe like 100 or 200 like different potential spellings. I think a more realistic solution would be to use that, and the editor or the curator who's adding this information would use the database as a resource. They'd get the different spellings of that author, and they just cut and paste them into the system and say, okay, this is like Mahmoud Darwish, but this is also the other spellings of that name. And then when someone does a search and misspells it, you know, like if I search for like Ahmed or Mohammed, I don't know how it's spelled in English, so I like just type it as it comes into my head, you know, and Google sorts that out. Google doesn't care. So if we have this database of alternative spellings as part of each record, then we can automatically match that.
Okay, I have another question, sorry. Because it works for YouTube, I don't know how it would work with a bit website. For instance, if I put, when I tag my videos, I always put the name of the author or the book that I'm talking about in all possible stupid typos.
Yes.
Yeah, so I always do it so that it would always be found.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so if we, for instance, put also the name of the author, like with one way that we decide upon, and then tag just not in the front end, but like in the back end, tag all the other different ways people might use.
Exactly. Yes.
And then search
hire you
this.
and you will do it.
So,
Yes, like with all the ways.
Yes.
I mean, not even like different languages, but like for instance, Muhammad, you can write it with the U, with the O, with the E, and then we can always write it in the tag in the back end, and then it will be visible if we search for it.
So basically, there's two different things. There's people who are searching on Google that will then find the results from Google, and there's ways of flagging each page to say this page is about Muhammad, whatever, and Google will find it because of the alternative spellings, but also on the internal search engine, because we've tagged this page with these like 5 or 10 or 20 alternative spellings, however you spell it, as long as that alternative spelling is in the database, and it will be found in the same way that you tag pages like that. Sorry.
No, I think we're going to have to wrap it up soon for the coffee break. But before that, we have a question from Elisabetta, and then
No, it was the same.
Oh, the same. Oh, then Pedro. Yeah, and then I think Yasmina and we'll have to go off and do some technical things. So we'll have a coffee break, and then Yasmina will talk to us about her her work. But go ahead, Pedro.
Just for me to understand, so your objective public is European publishers who will be
interested in translating from Arabic.
Discover a book that is in LEILA database. That's right.
Not exactly. I mean, we are not only a database. We also want to link to all the existing content introducing to Arabic literature. For instance, to what Marcia is doing on Arabic. also to have some information on the Arab book market. Like the whole idea is like, I'm a prospective publisher somewhere in Europe. I don't know at all how to start with if I want to translate from Arabic. You know, what is written, what are the voices today, what are the tendencies, what are the where are the writers? What I mean, I want to know something about. This is the minimum level. Then you have the more experienced. This is what we're saying, publishers such as the independent publishers scouting for new voices, and we would like the website to have information for the two types, for all the European publishers who would want to scout titles to translate, but not only through the database, also with links to existing critical corpuses, to existing info.
For example, I'm a Spanish publisher, I say, oh, it looks fantastic. Will LEILA website link me directly with whoever has the rights so I can discuss it with?
The website, no, but the question is, and this is, I don't know where is the topic, but we'll manage like what we didn't, I mean, we will adapt the program of, after the sequence with Yasmina, we will re-adapt the program to make sure that we tackle the issues that were in the program. For instance, one of the big questions is what about the contact form on LEILA's website? It could be one idea that they contact us by email, but we don't have even les épaules, like we can do something like that right now, but we started discussing it with the translators, something that we might be able to start and do at least at the time we launch the website, because there's at least some work before we can launch the first version of the website, would be to have a contact form addressing publishers, and we still didn't say also cultural operators, etc., but at least European publishers who say, like, this is my project, I want a counselor because I want to start translate from Arabic, or I want a translator because I have an idea of a title to translate, etc. So a contact form where they would approach LEILA, and we then would have started and developed a database together with Marcia, together with the translators and the other translators, experts they know, etc. And this will be the kind of secret weapon of LEILA that won't be online as a database of expertise, but that we can be approached to put expertise in contact with a European publisher. But there won't be any direct, like, entry in contact with the publisher of this book in the catalog. You know what I mean? It will not be on matchmaking, an automatic matchmaking or something like that. I think it should be through a contact form.
Okay, but that means a lot of work by your side instead of if you already know.
It's editorial work, huh?
Yeah, it's like what Marcia was saying. She asked
yes,
60,000
Marcia would be happy if we did it, and we will try to absorb it.
If you want to have a big scope European, you will need a big office to answer all this. I'm telling you because we're doing something similar with related for journalists with Arab Muslim voices in Spain. At the end, we decide that we have no time to do this because it will not be practical. So what we do is, okay, we approve the sources and we approve the journalists, and then they make the common search. And that's why I was asking this here, because it's a question of technical programming. And once they are approved, they can be in contact directly. It's not us who have to say, okay, here I give you the contact of, if you already have these two informations, okay, I want to translate this. And you have a list of whatever translators from Spanish to Arabic, and maybe directly the person who has the rights to negotiate.
Mm-hmm. This might be a question for publishers to publishers, like another meeting in the time of LEILA will be Arab and European publishers meeting in Tunis, and if they need this tool to be in contact or to start being able to interact on the rights, this could be an option for the future, or what we'd like to have. But for now, for us, it's more European publishers who want some help in their country to be put in contact or to have something else as the website, as an information and all that. And then, of course, if we put them in contact with a translator and expert as a scout or as an editorial advisor, of course, it won't be for free. You know, like LEILA will be the intermediary for free, but then, of course, the publisher knows that he would like pay the scout, the translator, etc., etc. So as long as it's limited to publishers, the contact form is, I think we'll be able to handle it, but it's also something that we want to
Yeah, you'll have to have a policy of,
and to know if all of you, for instance, in your fields would accept to be contacted by us, like we send you this contact form that we received from that publisher, could you answer to me, or do you think of something? It's a whole cooptation.
Yeah, but I think later in your talk, you'll be able to tell us about some of the problems and challenges you've come up with.
This is interesting for publishers to publishers, what you're saying now, or I want to write for this.
Yeah, but maybe we should stop for
Maybe we
about
can take
5-10 minutes. And then Yasmina will see you right after. Yeah.
Is it okay for your time, Yasmina? Is it okay for you? 10 minutes? And maybe when I do some questions.
Thank you for your.
Arabic to Spanish.
I didn't know that.
De todas maneras, a mí me gusta la parte de investigación.
Sí, sí. No, está bien. Y todos nosotros que estuvimos trabajábamos con varios tipos de en la vida académica, nosotros en Francia y ahora mismo, hoy mismo tengo mi vuelo para regresar a Argentina.
Très bien demander à temps. Et si après on a perdu la tête, on peut assez sélectif arriver à la. Je pense que c'est ça. Et après, tu auras le temps de. Parce que peut-être que se trouver la bonne pour être un réseau qui reste fermé, même si c'est aussi d'avoir plusieurs c'est sûr de ne pas laisser rentrer le loup dans la galerie j'ai oublié de payer pour faire le droit, elle m'a dit que j'ai filé mais vraiment mais là c'est mieux dit sur le niveau c'est ça que j'ai le truc oui est-ce que je peux comprendre je vais voir un peu mes collègues en fait j'ai vu de rester entre soi, après, vous réfléchissez, oui, non, mais est-ce que si elle a une existence un tout peu physique quelque part, c'est pour ça que je disais c'est notre arme secret au sens où c'est qui accepte, parce que dès qu'il y a une existence un peu d'écart, et que quelqu'un dit, un ami m'a dit qu'il en était, ce qu'il en est, il est déjà obligé de dire, oui, c'est ce que disait Marcia, c'est qu'elle a lu en fait, ouais. Et là, par exemple, je ne sais pas si tu connais en Italie, mais en fait, c'est Marcia qui a un moment, est-ce que tu peux réfléchir à des gens d'Europe qui passent là-dessus, puis on m'a contacté pour une espèce de nouveau arabien en Italie, qui peut faire un cours de traducteur, des premières initiatives. Et ça marche super, mais il y a des moments en fait, et j'ai compris, on fait un zoom, et elle a super. Elle m'envoie aussi en vidéo déjà des points politiques. Je l'enverrai si ça l'intéresse, les points politiques qui sont un peu couverts. Et du coup, j'ai tout de suite envoyé ça au traducteur d'art qui m'ont pas du tout répondu. Alors, ça fait un peu pas étant. Mais Sophie Agrève, personne qui m'a dit. Nous, on fait, ce qu'on disait, il y a tout type de sélection, ça c'est un peu moins les super auteurs, etc. Mais en fait, après, il y a des tables, des gens qui étaient ici, avec qui je demandais pareil, mais c'est quelque chose, et pas, elle m'a essayé, oui, enfin, elle et ses quatre traducteurs, quelque chose, elle est et du coup, c'est pour ça que je dis le loup dans la version, moi je fais un site, c'est quelqu'un qui moi-même pas expert, donc je peux dire pour aller vraiment expertiser hyper vite la liste de sites, quel emploi, etc. Pour pouvoir lire les traductions, vraiment italien, et du coup, c'est hyper dur. Le cause là-dessus de rester des temps. On ne peut jamais dire à un auteur, comme de l'école, qui fait le web. Et après, comme ça, je pense que c'est hyper bien.
Oui, on peut faire plusieurs. Il y aura toujours des.
Oui, je me souviens même au bureau du livre en Égypte, il est hyper dur parfois d'éloigner des gens, des candidatures, c'est hyper dur. C'est pour ça que je dis que notre contaction avec les éditeurs, ça essaye par les auteurs qui sont bien dans la contaction en des auteurs qui moi j'en ai vu des éditeurs qui le les auteurs qui ont le col à une recette de traducteur, et qui ont envoyé leur pitch en arabe. Ah oui, forcément,
That's the point. If you don't, if you have the resources, it's great. But if you don't, I mean, if you have to manage all this writing back and forward, checking, because also there is a lot of, I mean, maybe you have to ask around, but if you have proof, the same editorial houses that you open the database and once you have the right.
For the match making, yes, I think the match making is good to have functionality for in between publishing. Especially if you make a book after. Same with the concept form, we can experience. We are allowed to experience it, like we are in Europe, I don't know what, so if we open the website and suddenly we have like 100 forms a day and we cannot, then we can close it again and experience something. I think we can experience it, but it seems manageable to be able to link publishers who contact us for a project like for specific.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wish if we collapse, I would have to rethink those who have so many names, etc. But I think you have to think
I'm sorry because
in the future.
Yes.
If you're, it's easier to have it, even if you don't develop totally the tool, but have it in mind.
Yes.
In case LEILA.
But you are going to present, when you present your website, you will present this tool that you have.
Not necessarily, because it's, but I mean, it's not complicated, but I think you can have it. But also with translators, once you approve that this is a approved translator.
Yes.
And you can choose languages. I need a translation from Arabic into Spanish. Once you approve,
I don't know why, but for me it's something weird related to the.
yeah, but then you will get crazy when you will do that at the European level.
It's true, and I think we have to discuss with Marsha about it, because Marsha has been over and
That's the question I wanted to ask her, because sometimes she was not sure.
yeah.
Sometimes she would say I, and sometimes she would say we. So
Yes, because
she has a team around.
yes, she has a team. Yes, and I think she's always on the, she's also not an I person. She's an I person doing everything herself, but not an I person wanting to say that she's doing everything herself. So it's still like amazing her, but she has some helpers, of course, for Arabic poetry, and then also sometimes for some covering, sometimes they're just doing at the same time. And so she's someone taking it here, has some resources. I think this is why she has said that Arabic poetry starts to be able to play. This was silence.
I have to be there. No, I like
Yeah, this is what you'll tell us about later, right?
We know.
Yeah.
Have one person giving.
When you said but you can't if you're the European curriculum. You cannot.
At least it's finished. If you want to ask for a second, you have to.
Yeah, either she's commercial or she's
we have the same program. We are in the program
people would buy it online or not.
We publish it online in Arabic, Spanish, and English. And then we managed to publish the commercial. The biggest Spanish it was an adaptation of I couldn't find anyone because it was a big so all the research it's not translated to English, French, or anything, and you want us to spend all that money because you think it's a great product. It's one of the cases. The head of the publishing house, for example, is fantastic. No English, no website, so he will be never.
But he would be the perfect candidate, though, to be highlighted.
He will never be able
But doesn't he go, he doesn't speak any other languages like Arabic, so he needs to get like a representative just on the Arabic,
I mean, that's why I say, if you can have a form where say, okay, I have this. I think it's difficult to do this.
But no, it's a big problem.
We know and they have to speak, but we all think that the sculptors of the commission house supposed to do, they that project will not. The question is how to fill the gaps that doesn't exist.
Be the interface.
Yes, this, we were hired this big €3 million project.
Je vais voir si vous travaillez. Je suis au Bozar. Donc, je dirais ce matin, j'ai vu les plantations, c'est intéressant. Oui, bon, ça va, bébé un peu chez moi, tranquille. Jean-Paul Chinelo, je suis German of his space. Ouais, I won't say that, but this is we have to go back to work right now. Tout va bien?
They want it was Spanish Barcelona based on Arabic, only Arabic, no single person speaking Arabic.
How is this possible?
A small Arabic NGO, not the usual ones who speak English and feel all the previous European people. And they didn't want to have the goal in Arabic.
This is reality. Yeah.
But how do you work? No, we're going to small editors. They don't know how to write a project. Give them one page, and they really want to approach budget, and then we work with them, and we teach them how to write. And the next time they will go for the other.
Even as we were saying before, between French and English speakers, there's hardly any crossover. The English speakers cannot find anything in French. Nothing. So either, and the French speakers are not so fantastic at finding anything. I mean, when I talk about Arabic all the time, and I told them about it, but many people don't know. And it's an incredible resource, but it's just because you can imagine that. I mean, like I interviewed this fantastic publisher in New York who couldn't speak anything else but Arabic, which is beautiful. But I was so lucky because my husband did the interview, and so we found out all these interesting things, like he prints in Iran, you know, I mean, all sorts of details that you would not know, that you know about something and that they're
Okay. Bueno, encantado.
De que tengas viajes tan particulares.
Sí, sí, sí. Ahora, y mañana estarás con las mismas personas. Mañana.
Yo creo que sí, porque te vas a conectar.
Creo sí. Solo tengo que preguntar que me envíen sí. Pero sí, voy a.
Bueno, pues enhorabuena. Yeah.
If you translate, have a trip.
It's very important that if we were discussing these issues, I want to say, and I'm going to talk about that of other kinds of not only tragic.
It's okay, don't worry, just like, yeah, it's okay.
I can't now.
We can get it down. I can get it down.
I think there are so many different groups already pitching in ideas, and I think we will end up getting something interesting to build up.
Yeah,
build up
it has
on.
to be very basic at first.
Yeah, at first it has to be.
And just sort of.
Yeah. But I'm sure, then if we get funding and if it goes on, I'm sure there are many people who are very passionate about this and want to.
It's good you go before you because I'm going to talk about the 20 years of failure, so it's good you go and think there's still a lot of people passionate.
No, I think there are a lot of passionate people, but if
Yeah,
things are not.
we are here.
Yeah, no, but I think people are not organized. Most projects fail because people have bad management. Bad management and bad organization. And this is an essential component. Like, okay, what do you want? Who's your audience? Like, where's the money coming from? And then you build small, and then you get bigger. Rather than, oh wow, because I've been part of startups that have, and
I hope we'll get somewhere.
I mean, dreaming is great, but one has to be very, very.
But as I was saying already, like for us, unfortunately, the others have not had this benefit experience. The 9 translators who participated in our residency, for us it was already, now we are a group and we know each other really well and we will be working together. So it's already something I'm hoping that.
Merci beaucoup. On retient en plus le sujet demain, je ne rappelle plus. On le prendra le début de l'émission en solidarité. Mais en fait, j'aimerais le sujet de la discussion qu'on avait le cadre. On va aussi parler de
Maybe
I wait till she comes, but it can go down a bit.
Yeah.
Puedo practicar mi español. No, tú me hablas y yo comprendo, pero no puedo.
Ese es el siguiente paso. Cuando tú ya entiendes todo lo que tienes que ver,
Se habla despacio.
sí, yo te lo mandaré porque también.
Así te mando el artículo sobre las demás. Yo tengo un website y puedes mirar, puedes
Vale, tenemos una parte de la página web que es un poco sobre con Oriente Medio, un acuerdo también para nosotros somos ¿para qué vas a repetir cosas que ya están bien hechas? Esto, incluso en España lo vamos a hacer, o sea, con eso escriben sobre el mundo árabe, que están bien hechas, pues si salen de la manera nacionalista, 2 semanas después, si vuelve a salir, la gente que no lo puede leer, lo puede leer.
¿Pero lo vas a traducir?
Sí.
Ah,
J'essaie de faire un truc bien avec les et après, il faudra qu'on fasse un petit 5 minutes pour organiser. Mais pour moi, c'était des 5-6 minutes un peu de retour d'expérience pour ensuite c'est ça que j'ai pas fait. Moi, c'était pas une suite d'intervention. Il faudrait vraiment peut-être le dire à un moment, c'est quelqu'un qui prend la parole en fait. Après, on pense que c'est le moment où il faudra dire non, mais que ce soit les interventions et qu'on soit orienté. Oui, c'était vraiment parce qu'il y a un rapporteur qui se sont dit en commun traducteur. Qu'est-ce que tu as dit à Yacine? Merci d'avoir travaillé. Et comment il s'est écrit, finalement, c'était en fait, elle avait fait un peu de critique littéraire. Ah, Yacine, on avait fait combien de temps avec elle en présentant? Donc, pour l'instant,
Donc 30 minutes pour elle et ensuite 30 minutes. Et donc Pedro, il vient et après.
Mais c'est vraiment très concret pour moi, les interventions des c'était pas comme le tour de la ce matin, c'était pour nous notre expérience à la website, qui est la problématique. Ils ont diminué les ventes après ils ont maintenant et les gens qui ont bien la solidarité, on a fait la discussion sur l'identité collective derrière les gars.
Mais ça peut durer des heures. Là, c'est difficile.
Oui, qui va faire. Et alors, mais après,
normalement, il y a rien et ensuite c'est perdu. Mais tu vois, comme par exemple, de l'identité, ça c'est un peu là jusqu'à minuit.
Mais oui, mais non, mais en fait, avant de moi je vais reprendre la parole pour essayer de passer pour demander si ou si les gens pensent que c'est c'était une vraie question.
Et tu ne pas garder ça jusqu'à la fin. Ok, ça on peut garder à la fin. Et comme ça, on a les informations.
La question, tout le monde est d'accord parce que comme l'a dit, c'est la fin. Ça, c'est une vraie question. Parce qu'il faudrait quand même pour aider à
sur le réseau,
au moins commencer à avoir les catégories des onglets sur le site. Et ces onglets, on a accès aux catégories des informations, la littérature arabe, des informations sur le marché, le livre arabe, un newsfeed dont on reparlera de temps pour y aller direct, et aussi de m'appeler aux initiatives qui voient quel lien ça a quand même d'avoir une
mais je pense que
à la fin,
very early for us. Check it again.
Okay. So we're ready to begin with Yasmina, who's going to present the website that she works with. And then afterwards, Deuxième, maybe we'll have Pedro will talk about Al-Fanar, and after that, maybe we can discuss, we'll try and wrap up to talk a little bit about the website and how you would all like.
Yes, to try and see what we do with the different issues that we didn't raise, like maybe to tell you what we had in mind and to
and what you think of it.
And what you think of it, exactly. Yes.
Okay, so Yasmina, si tu veux, vas-y.
Voilà, vous m'entendez là?
Oui.
Ok. Bon, tout d'abord, donc d'abord merci de.
Oh, sorry, English, please.
I'm sorry. First of all, thank you for having me. I was very happy to continue discussion with Deuxième about this project, and also spoke with Jack. Sorry, Richemont. And then anyway, so I'm happy to be part of this. I think it's a great initiative. So probably you already know, I'm a literary agent. I've been working in promoting Arabic translation and adaptation rights since 2004. And recently I've taken also different responsibilities in publishing in the Arab region. So I've been always very keen on trying to basically contribute to the development of the Arabic publishing scene as much as I could. And so this is one project that I thought was relevant for what you're trying to do with LEILA. It's Mubtada wa Khabar, it's the website that I'm sharing here. So we've had a technical glitch a couple of years ago because as I will at some point explain in that presentation, it's not like, it's the website was very much just a spontaneous work of art. And so at some point I completely missed that the PHP code needed to be updated. And so there are like, it was updated, but still some minor things to be done. That's why you see some broken links and some strange URLs, but I think it still illustrates the purpose for today. So I think it's fine. But so just a bit of background on why this website came about. So in 2006 or 7 approximately, I had been agenting already for a couple of years, and I was very frustrated as an agent with the lack of independent information channels. I had no way of knowing what was going on in the Arab region. I was based in Paris, and I had to rely a lot on people telling me what to read. And of course, if you go on, like at the time, there were already websites of some like journals, like newspapers. They would have like sections for literature, so I could go and have a look, but it wasn't the same. And when I compared to what I knew existed in other languages, I felt that we were very limited. And I was really obsessed with this idea, you know, what were people publishing in Sudan or in Libya and Oman, like these more remote, quote unquote, places far from publishing centers like Egypt and Lebanon. So what were they doing? What were they, you know, writing and publishing? Of course, I knew that eventually these writers would go to publishers in Egypt and Lebanon, but meanwhile, you know, so I felt that there was like a very large portion of the Arab region that was really completely kept in the dark. And so this is how I started thinking, you know, maybe we could start working on a tool that could help promote Arabic literature and also kind of help create quality standards, because in my head, everything was linked, and I'm still convinced of this today. Like people would tell you that, you know, Arabs don't read. We've heard this so many times in various ways. But honestly, I think we should pay tribute to Arab readers, because despite huge distribution issues, despite very poor information, like you walk on the street, you rarely have any information about books. It's not like books are everywhere, very accessible. Despite all of that, they still find ways to buy books. So these people are really searching for books to buy. And so this tells me that maybe if there was more information, people might buy more books. And so this is basically what I would like to believe, but I do think at least part of it is true. And on the other hand, I also felt that the opacity in the Arab book market didn't help, let's say, the establishing of quality standards. You have like a very broad variety of quality standards. And I think Samar could confirm, as also working in the publishing industry, between one house and another in terms of quality of publishing. The variation is very big. And I thought that's because there is no information. People don't know what exists, and there is no like any platform that's visible to all, where all books are kind of evaluated with the same standards. And so I thought, okay, we should do this website. And at the time, it became possible for various reasons, but it was a very long journey. And so Lucien asked me to share the lessons learned. And so as I present the project, I will also share the lessons learned. first lesson, simplify, simplify, simplify. And when you think it's simple enough, simplify some more, because actually it's not as simple as you think. And so this is, at least this is what I learned, the first lesson. So basically the first version of the site that finally saw the day of light in 2010, after 18 months of very painful development, like it was really a nightmare to work on this website. We had a very poorly executed site, but it wasn't only the fault, not the mistake of basically choosing the wrong technical partner. I think it's because also the scope of the site was just not realistic. Like it was a bilingual site that was supposed to be a magazine with various sections like children, literature, fiction, nonfiction, and we also wanted to have like graphic novels. And inside each section, so you click and you go one level deeper, you get like listings of books, and then you click more, and in each book you have like a publisher contact information that you are supposed to be able to contact, and then you want to have a section for translators. So because the idea, the overarching idea seemed very simple. We have the web, so it's a great tool to like overcome all these distribution and communication problems we have in the Arab region. And we want to communicate about Arabic books. Why limited to the Arab region? Let's talk to also like the international scene. So let's have a bilingual site. So it seemed very straightforward. It seemed like the simplest way to do it. But of course, so it wasn't. And I think part of the reason why is because I think we were not ready to develop the site at that time. It was too early in the process. We were still brainstorming. Actually, today I see it, but at the time I didn't see it. And I really spoke to a lot of people and institutions as well, like state institutions, private institutions. I really spoke to anyone I could. And so it was very clear to me that there was a need, but also people had various needs, but they were all converging. So in a way, what happened is that I kind of took on board all these needs and I tried to answer them all at the same time, because I saw that they were all converging and I thought that they were all necessary to address. But in fact, this was a mistake. I mean, it was a mistake because we should have had identified the real need, or basically what we could do. And so this was basically the first mistake. We didn't simplify enough. Later, it appeared to me that we really had to distill the concept, and that's what we did. What we had to do, and I think this is what you're trying to do as well, is to basically start narrow as we can, and then scale. So it had to be narrow, but in a way that it could be scalable in the right direction. So that it seems simple in retrospect, but when we were inside, it was very hard to see what was the angle that we really need to adopt to get to the point where we wanted. I don't know if we found it, but I think we did. And the website isn't evolving for reasons that are very practical, which is lack of money and resource. But other than that, I think it wasn't going in the right direction. So what did we do? Basically, what is the core need was the main question. So what's the core need and who's the target? So, okay, it would have been great to have a bilingual site, but our target was the Arab region. So the website should be in Arabic, period. Forget about bilingual. The bilingualism really makes it so much more complicated. So we went for just Arabic. But what's the core need? Well, because the first website, which collapsed under its own weight, was more like a magazine type of thing, plus. But it appeared to us that actually before the magazine, something was missing. It's just pure information. Forget about evaluation of books. We didn't know what existed. Today is a bit better, but even now, I think I think it's still true today, but it was certainly true a few years ago. Like a lot of publishers don't even use ISBNs. ISBNs are not necessarily used for all books. Now it's getting better, but a lot of, there's still a lot of opacity. And recently the Arabic Publisher Association published a book. And they do mention that in the introduction as well, like saying we try to gather numbers, but it's very hard to get exact numbers because we don't know, how many books are being published. We have to rely on numbers publishers share. So this is still true today. We still are not basically very transparent, not because we don't work in this kind of very organized and systematic way. And so the question I was like, how can we do that? How can we work on this? And it became very obvious that we couldn't have a top-down approach. It had to be bottom-up. And this is where the idea of a crowdsourced platform came up. So the idea was, okay, we want people basically to be able to add books, because if we don't know about these books, well, we won't be able to add them to the platform, very simply. So we wanted people to be able to register on the platform and add books, because the book was really the main entity. So, but what's a book? So the book is written by an author, so that's a second entity, and it's published by a publisher, that's a third entity. And we have the user, who's the reader, who's adding this content. So we now, on the website, you're seeing on the screen, I think, there are like these four main entities: the publisher, the author, the book, and the reader. And so these are the nodes basically of the website, and they're all linked to each other. So if I were to explain the journey, which I will in a moment, maybe I can show you on the website. But basically, I just wanted to clarify one thing. It turns out actually that book visibility online is a main challenge, and like even today, a lot of publishers don't have a website. They tend to use social media. And at the time I used to go like at book fairs, I spent hours trying to convince publishers to send me Excel sheets of their publications, which they very rarely did. They sometimes would share PDFs with me, which was useless in my case. Or they would tell me, you can go on Facebook, you can go on Instagram. The thing is, you can't search Facebook or Instagram for archives. It's good for like event communication. It's good for creating a buzz, but it's not, it doesn't work like a database. And a lot of websites, when it comes to Arabic publishers, are not searchable. So the structure from a metadata perspective is not friendly to use to search engines, because so basically you have like one URL, and on the same page you have like all these pictures of authors and information embedded, but they're not tagged in the right way. And so when you go on Google and you search for an author name, that just information doesn't appear. The website just doesn't come as a result of a search engine. So this is why basically the whole search experience when it comes to Arabic content in general, but in books in particular, is very poor. It's because the websites are not structured in the right way. This is how I came into the whole metadata thing, and I discovered things like dark web and unique URLs and meta tags and metadata and Onyx. So to go back to what we did with Al-Khabar in the end, so the website that you see is the last version. So the user journey is like this. So suppose I'm a user and I want to contribute to the website because there's a book I love and I want it to be there, let's say. So first, if I want to add and I click on the main button, I'm afraid to show you how it works because I'm afraid of all the glitches. So I'm not going to actually activate it, but I'll just show you. So if I click here, you know what, let me just try what happens. I'm supposed to be prompted, sorry, yeah. So you can add an author, add a book, or add a publisher. And so this is how I can decide what I want to add. If I want to add a book, then I have to basically enter the title, and the title will be searched in the database. If the title is already there, the system will suggest that I use that title. If it's not there, it will add it. When I add a title, I am prompted to fill a form. I don't know if it's important for you to see this, but I think I'll just explain. The form basically is using Onyx fields. So this will allow the author page, I can maybe click on this one, to be structured. So these are Onyx fields basically that are, and this is basically a book that I love that Samar must know because I think it's published by Dar al-Karma. And so all of these are Onyx fields and they're all clickable. So if I click on this Na al-Touhi name, it will lead me to the Na al-Touhi page. If I click on Dar al-Karma, which is the publisher, it will take me to Dar al-Karma's page. If I click on Masr, it will lead me to a page where plenty of books that are published in Egypt. If I click on 2019, it will take me to all books published in 2019. We wanted it to be playful. And this is like basically at the time we used big categories, but today I would recommend thema. So these are all metadata. And as you can see here, the book has a unique URL, which means that if you search for Al-Khuruj min al-Bala'a, of course, now the website is not very visited, but if it was a bit visited, this URL would appear easily in searches. So this is what we ended up doing. Now, there's of course a very big technical challenge regarding duplicates, as we discussed earlier. And so the idea was, as you fill the form, when you add the name of the author, there's a drop-down list that will suggest names that are similar to the one that you're filling. And as you fill, the suggestions reduce. I think you're all familiar with this process. And so if the author is already there, you just select him. And in that case, that book you're adding is added to his page. So let me try Dar al-Karma. Maybe they have more than one book on Muntada al-Khabar. They have 10 books, see. So if I click on this book here, so on this page here, as a pop-up window, I have all the books of Dar al-Karma. So because I selected Dar al-Karma from the drop-down list, this book basically is added to the Dar al-Karma page. So this was basically the idea. So basically the core. So going back to the lessons learned. So one of the lessons was, as I said earlier, start narrow but in a scalable way. There's so much we can do with this platform. There are ways that we can add SoundCloud bits if people want, for example, to add their voice as they read their book. There are ways for us to add calendars of events if authors, because authors and publishers can own their page. They can claim it, and then after verification of their ID, we can give them control of that page. And so they can add a calendar of event. There's so much that can be done, and that's what I mean by scaling. You know, the same website just growing in a direction that might make it more useful for today's purposes. What else did I had in mind? I wanted to use all sorts of funny statistics. I don't know if some of you use Shazam, but for example, in Shazam, there's a function that I love. You can see what people are searching for. Like you can go in Brazil and see what people are Shazamming and get a sense of what music they're listening to. And so I wanted to do something like that with books, where are these people who added these books? And because as a user, you can also love some books. And then, we could get a geographic distribution of where what books were loved. So this is what I had in mind, but of course, none of that happened for practical reasons that I had. So the site basically is just living on its own right now. All right, just looking through my notes here to make sure I'm covering everything. Yeah, so basically to sum up, the website is more like it has a Wikipedia type of DNA. That's the point of the website, but dedicated to Arabic books and in Arabic. So you cannot type in English, basically. The keyboard, like the field won't take it. It forces you to write in Arabic because we wanted to avoid this kind of mixed language that makes it more complicated. So of course, now I had another problem, which is what is the limit? So I was now happy. I had a site that worked. It looks nice. And I think it like the whole user journey, the whole user experience was great. And this is when we started gathering books. I started digging. Like I found like records in Omani libraries. Don't ask me why I found them, how. I found them online. I found lists of books produced by some Ministry of Agriculture in Sudan. I got very excited. Like suddenly I had access to all these books. And I wanted to start, uploading them. And I could, if I formatted them in Excel in the right way, I just could upload them. But then suddenly I realized because I got more and more lists of books and more lists, and so many books actually were being produced. Like, what do I do? Like, do I put everything? And a lot of it has very poor data, like, just a title and a publisher, and that's not very interesting. And also we had a social media account on Twitter that was extremely popular, but in a way, like, not in a way, it happens to be the case that all of our followers were very religious, and that's not the kind of content I was hoping to get on the platform. I was more like, I was trying to be more of a progressist, and I was afraid that the platform might fall into something that was very traditionalist. And so suddenly I felt that I actually had no control, which was actually the point initially. But then I realized that the limit was a real problem. And so maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I should have started even in the content small, like, for example, partnered up with specific publishers I knew did the work, well, and then opened up or expanded. I'm not sure how, maybe if there was an editorial team working behind it, it's different, but we were like two. So obviously it's a huge amount of work, but basically where's the limit, I think is a very real question that I think you're also asking yourselves, although like Lucien did mention, it's fiction, etc. And so the thing is, the reason why I had trouble putting limits is because I didn't want the site to be curated. That wasn't the point. And I didn't want to be the one to decide what deserved to be on the site or not, because the whole idea was for people to own it and to add books there, because I wanted the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it to be there for people to see the difference, and for diversity of evaluation, because there was ideally a sister magazine project that would have happened, and the evaluation to be like on equal grounds. I don't know if that makes sense, but in my head, it's very clear. And so this is where it stopped. It stopped for the fourth lesson learned, which I didn't manage to answer. So this is how I love the expression from the heart to the hand. That was a very good lesson, but that website didn't get to benefit from it. So in 2013, around that time, I was in Dubai, and Uber had a huge campaign where they wanted to basically encourage startups. And the idea was there are several VCs that would ride in Ubers, and you submit your idea, and if they like it, you get to ride in an Uber with a VC and pitch your idea in the ride, and then they can give you feedback or fund you. And so we submitted, and we got a ride with a great VC, actually a pioneer of web in the Arab region, and we had a great ride. And he loved the project, and he saw the need, and basically At the time, when I went to publishers to explain this project, nobody saw the point. They didn't care. They didn't see why I was bothering so much with that project. But he saw it immediately, and he wasn't from the publishing scene, but he really saw what this was meant to do. But he saw another problem, and he said, like, this is a project from the heart. But if you want a project from the heart to live and be viable, you need it to come to the hand. So you need a way for that thing to come from the heart to the hand, where it's not just a project of love, but a project that can actually be sustainable. The truth is, we have no structure. Like, this is, money I paid from my own pocket, time I put from my own. It's not a not-for-profit. It's not a business. We didn't have a clear business model. I didn't want to approach, Gulf countries for money. I wasn't in a position to approach European countries. So, it was a weird in-between situation that actually eventually led to this project just staying on standby. But I think this is also a problem you don't necessarily have, at least not in the midterm. But that's definitely one of the challenges that we had at the time. So basically, these are the 4 lessons learned in my case, and that's my story with Muntada Al Khabar.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. I didn't expect applause. Maybe I can stop sharing the screen now, unless you have questions on the website itself.
I will just want to ask you, Yasmina, who is your public, the ones you address to with this website?
So actually, ideally, you wanted to address readers and publishers, but they with different reasons. So the idea was readers. So this started at the time where Goodreads started with Arabic books, because at the time Goodreads was mostly English and Arabic wasn't really there. But so because actually, if you're a user, I think I can go on my own profile. If you're a user, you can have books you love, articles you like, publishers you like, and you can basically write comments, etc. And so there was to be a social platform dimension. So the idea was for people to be able to communicate with the author and the publishers through the platform. That was the next step. So for readers, publishers as well, because then through the platform they could communicate with the reader. They could reach out to other authors, and they could basically showcase their books, because at the time I had in mind publishers who did not have a website necessarily. And so but I hear a question, and I think it's a legitimate one, and I think that my answer is not satisfying. So I'm the user of this website. Probably that's not enough for it to live. But I think that's part of the problem. Because it's not really, it's more like a Wikipedia kind of thing. And is there enough interest for it? I don't know. But this is actually all the users that are, like, as you can see, unfortunately, you have broken links here. But people were registering to add books. And I was surprised to see how many of them wanted and reached out to say, we're trying to add a book, we're trying to claim a profile. So there is some interest. And I think if we worked more properly, it could have maybe we would have had an idea of basically scaling it in a direction that was needed.
Yasmina, I have a quick question. You mentioned a source of data you were using. I didn't catch the name of it.
A sort of, sorry?
Onyx. Okay.
Onyx, yeah. So this was for me a great discovery, and it's been ever since accompanying me in many ways. Onyx stands for Online International Exchange. So basically, it's just standards that publishers or like book professionals use to describe book metadata, so that basically databases can communicate with each other. So now, so for example, say you're a publisher, you have a database of books. And if the Onyx is just a way of describing the different fields, and you can use HTML to describe the records and using these tags. It's just because it's interesting, because it's a standard that's used by a lot of organisms or stakeholders of the industry, and therefore you can share database information and the fields correspond. So it becomes very practical. And I did that with this platform because I thought that looking forward, if we were to communicate with international libraries or whatever, then we would already have the required structure at least to start with. So we wouldn't have to start from scratch.
Thanks.
Yes, Mina, I have a question. If you were to start over from scratch, knowing what you know now, what would you base your website on? Like, what would be some of the 5, let's say, pillars, columns that you would base it on?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Honestly, I still think I think this would have been some form of social platform for books. In a way, it's much more complex than Goodreads because it's not just readers talking about books. It's really the book that's at the heart of it. But what would have been nice would have been for it to become, for example, let's say, where a platform where you could have hosted live events. So not on YouTube, but on this platform, you could have had your channel, on your page, for example, where you could have had your live event if you're a publisher. So it would have basically been like a hub. This is the direction I think it should have taken. It was already on the agenda, like we had already SoundCloud in mind back in 2013. So before audiobooks really came into the market, because people were already reading snippets of their books and putting them on SoundCloud. So I thought it was nice to have like this connection with the author. So I think this is probably where this would have gone. But can you compete in the end with things like YouTube and Facebook? And, I don't think so. So maybe this couldn't have been anyway a commercial project, because part of me was thinking maybe this could become commercial if we have enough data. Then we can analyze the data and provide the information to publishers. I'm not saying sell data in the wrong way, but if you have plenty of data, you can tell publishers, because they're missing data. Like you can tell them, look, it seems like I don't know, like children books seems very much in demand in that country. So we also thought we could have integration with digital commerce without selling ourselves, but linking to platforms that do. And so that way also, if they want a book in digital format but can't find it, then they can request it. Or even we thought we could open it to booksellers so that they can say, we have that book. But this requires a huge integration with institutions that don't necessarily have it. Like I was talking with Antoine earlier last week, and like he told me the whole, how long the process was to really like digitize everything, in terms of logistics. And I'm not sure a lot of booksellers have this kind of infrastructure in the region. So I'm not sure that's the answer to the question, but I still think there is need for this type of project. But I think it would have necessarily been, like Wikipedia, something that's not for profit. And I wanted to avoid that because I thought at the time that being a commercial project would have given me more freedom. Maybe it's a mistake, because in the end you're not free because you're constrained by the market. The other way around is you're constrained by the donors, right? Maybe in Europe, because that constraint is not that big, I don't know. But I was very afraid, basically, of seeking, funds from Gulf countries. I'm going to be very blunt, but I didn't want to have this kind of funding, and so I just excluded it completely. But I think this is necessarily a not-for-profit project.
Thank you.
Are
there any other questions for Yasmin? No? So this might be,
it would be so interesting if we could have her feedback.
Discussions
tomorrow. But if you agree, I will get back to you if you don't have time to connect tomorrow. Maybe to come and present you like the outcomes and all that, and to rediscuss it with you, because it will be interesting to have.
Of course, I mean, I'd be happy to continue the conversation. I won't make it tomorrow. Because actually all the plans change, and we just got here instead of just leaving today, so that's why. But yeah, I mean, please feel free to reach out whenever you think it's a good idea, and I'd love to hear where you are, and and give you my feedback if it's useful or if it's worth anything.
Yes, because also we didn't mention your work as an agent, as Raya agency. We spoke briefly about it with Pierre Astier this morning, and there too you have a lot to say, and some of the expectations of European publishers. So yes, we'll get back to you with a report on what we and take your feedback then. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. And we'll have Pedro who can tell us about his European experience. do you want to kind of set up here? Yeah, I think it might be nicer, no? If you don't mind, I think it's maybe because we've been looking at a screen. It's nice to have
Well, thank you very much for inviting me and for Alfanar. When Lucien told me, okay, you can talk about Alfanar, I said, okay, I'm going to talk to you about 20 years of failures. But this morning at the door, I found Elizabeth again after a long time. Said, no, but Pedro, we are better than 20 years ago. Also is true. So let's be positive, and I'm going to try to explain you. I mean, Alfanar, we started something like 20 years ago, trying to bring information from the Arab world, from Arabic sources into the Spanish. We started with journalists because they were writing about the Arab world without quoting Arabic sources. So we translate, we have like 1,080,000 articles. And
1,800 or 18,000?
180,000.
180,000
entries, between articles, titles, and cartoons.
Of translated content.
Yeah, from 20. We used to translate like 40 newspaper daily with newsletter, blah blah, whatever. When translators were good, let's say, valued, and it was for think tanks, news, journalists, etc. And with the money we get from that, we try to collaborate with the Spanish publishing house, Icaria Editorial, to create a collection of Arab books, all types of books. We were young, thinking that this was possible. The problem is the others, they don't know how to do things. So we got there and we want to control it. So we pay half of the cost. Disaster. We bring the authors because we know them, we have the connection with my friends from university, they write the book reviews, etc., etc. We're still, if you want, some even Elias Khoury or something like that available in Spanish. So why I say this? I think it's very interesting, this project. Is when Lucien told me, say, okay, you're crazy. I think it's a huge challenge, because it's also a very big responsibility, because when we start this collection, we say, okay, what we should translate? We translate poetry, we translate theater, we translate alternative Egyptian young authors, all the more well-known as Elias Khoury, and we will move it around. And still, it's a question that in Spain, I don't know, because some years ago, Turner, I don't know why, decided to make a collection, finally, a good collection with money of Arabic modern literature, curated by someone really knowing the field. Say, finally, we will have not this piece and I don't know how to say it, right, and pieces of this publishing house, this other, on these independent houses that they try to do whatever they can. Also, failure. Why? We don't know.
I mean, it didn't sell.
It didn't sell.
¿Cuál es al lado? Oriente
Mediterráneo.
Ediciones de Oriente del Mediterráneo. Es perdón,
Yeah. Or
ediciones de Oriente del Mediterráneo.
they are in Madrid. Yeah, but Radu Ashur, it was published. But this is the same. Okay, Oriental Mediterranean has been publishing, and that's the next another failure. I will get back to that. Don't worry. So So, I mean, this is a question, I mean, and I think it's great to have debates and exchange from other countries, no? Because, well, as someone asked me, but Pedro, what is your feedback after 20 years of this? Don't ask me about that, my age or my weight. No way, that's unpolite. But I think we have to keep working, and that's why we changed our website just 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. But something that it works, we did was we create a comic from a novel. Well, actually, what I did want is to translate Lutfiya Dulaimi, Iraqi author, novel into Spanish. But when I went to all this Oriente Mediterranean or either the biggest planeta, I say, I want to translate this book. It's amazing. It really tells you the first years of occupation in Iraq. Women, they are the protagonists. Pedro, no English translation, no French translation. No way we are going to risk for that. So we did an adaptation into comic. I translate some of the chapters with some Spanish artists, and finally it came fully. It's still available in Arabic, English, and Spanish online. And we managed, and this is something that we learn, I think is very important, to be published in the biggest publishing house of comics in Spain. And I didn't have any contacts. So I just look for the authors in the Spanish authors, say, hey, you're crazy, why are you doing? Well, you can let me try. So we send the first chapter and I say, okay, oh, we like it, okay, but it has to be free online. So okay, no problem. Super. And they publish it. And they sell the whole printing. Now we are seeing if they do second or not. And that's, I think, for us, it was a big success because it arrived to people that is not in our environment. So when we talk about Iraq, normally come people that they are already convinced. So reaching to 2,000 new readers that they are reading a comic and a story of Iraqi people. I think that was very interesting, and that's why we keep working with a lot with Arab comics, and that's a question maybe for
maybe now you can publish the real translation.
Well,
real novel.
We did publish the first Arabic translation of a comic from Spanish, from Arabic into Spanish,
okay.
And that's another thing.
Okay. No, but you turned the novel into a comic. Did I understand that right? So the comic was a success, kind of.
Well, yes, but on the comic.
On the comic level, yeah. But now, if the comic is a success, maybe you can try to publish the real novel.
Yeah, but you go to the literary community say, hey, what's the success of comic? Okay, go to Marvel. That's another question that I want to ask, if you will have comics or graphic novels, maybe not comics, in the catalog of LEILA. But we translate the first comic from Arabic into Spanish, because all the comics we have from Arabic authors are from LEILA Al-Rashid, or other authors that they write in English or French. Okay, so we translate Murabba Wolaban from Lina Merhets from Lebanon, which here we have to talk about the responsibility we have as translators. I don't know how you say agents, because we were not an agent, we were just following up people to translate. No. Maybe it was not the right book to be the first one translated directly from Arabic because it's so complex, or it's not an horizontal graphic novel. I don't know. But for sure, the mistake was publishing that in Oriente Mediterranean, which is this independent publishing house that is being publishing in Spain Arab books, but they asked me to be like the curator of the new collection of comics. I said, oh, how not? But the problem is that they are not in the, how you say?
Comic ecosystem.
Exactly. So you go to the comic books stores and they are not there. So when you go to the independent libraries, maybe they are there, but they are not. So that's also, I think, it's important. So we stopped that collaboration and we're thinking about new ways of publishing comics, not books. For me, books, another story, too complicated.
Just come to the website that you, to the new version of the website that you launched to connect with the.
Why?
Because at Factory we are.
Yeah, sorry. Why we change the website? Because what we want is that all these products that they are translated, that they are present from Arabic, at least before we were focused, as I told you, about journalists, think tanks, they say people that are experts or they already have an interest on the Arab world. And what we are doing now is trying to create, let's say, not so academic or specific work, but more sensibility or kind of contents about wider issues, like of course literature, social issues, music, traveling bloggers in Arabic, cooking, and of course different things that will give information to people that they have any interest on the Arab world. So when they approach to anything, a novel, a comic, a music, or a story from the Arab world, they have at least some more knowledge. And the best example for that is a new program we create is Aflam Cinema, which is the idea of using cinema to talk or to get in contact with Arab reality. What we do, we choose film, or we create like a advisory committee from Spanish experts on cinema and Arab world and Arab experts, which I think is very important. So the films that we choose, we have both feedback. When we have a big problem that it was already told here, that we want to present films that they are not tragic, that they are not about terrorists, not about Muslim radicals, about women oppression, but also about other issues of Arab life. And we are struggling with that, okay? So I think that's also important to work on that issue. And that's why we think, we have recovered the book reviews from the most important books, that Arab books that are still available in the market, that we will be publishing one every week. So not only for new comes, but for things that are already important and they are available because they passed. And this kind of information, slowly, like trying to create a community of people, not the usual suspects as we used to have. We have from now like 3,000 followers in media, social media. So we thought that's the maximum of our experts on or already interested people on Arab world. So now we will try with video, with shorter news, translation of subtitle of parts of the films, and this Aflam Cinema initiative, book reviews, etc., to try to create like a more welcoming environment for whenever crazy people like you decide to translate a book or initiatives to have a public maybe, and I don't know, because we don't have, of course, the magic solution of why Arabic books are so small, have a so small market in Spain. So that's our idea from now.
So you moved from an academic expert base to you want to move to a wider public going through maybe more commercial projects, or maybe not commercial, but more.
There's no commercial on Arabic issues.
Not commercial, just wider, more popular.
And more divulgative. Yeah. So.
Also, there's a reality that was not present when we created Alfanar 20 years ago, which is the so-called second generation in Spain. Okay, so there is a generation of Arab origin.
From the Maghreb, mostly.
Mostly from the Maghreb. Some of them keep the Darija, the Moroccan dialect, others they don't, but all this kind of cultural approach that they think it could be attractive to them and can be a link with the rest of the society. Like, for example, what we did last week with this, we screened a Moroccan film in an environment where there's a lot of Moroccan community. So they were the protagonists, and it opened a debate. It was a surrealist comedy, but at least it was a comedy. So and that's the idea that there was Moroccan origin people on the stage to talk about their reality. With the idea was change with neighbors. That's a little bit our idea.
Could you just I'm always getting back to our website and literature rather than cinema. If you could just show, do you have it here on your website, maybe to show us the reports you're doing on books mainly? Because we have 15 minutes left for the whole.
Why I talk about the film issues, because I think the structure could be helpful for later.
Yes, of course. No, sorry, I didn't mean that. But also, we have to also put it in perspective with the Arab pop in Italy, Arabesque, etc., with other websites in Europe that are also have a base of cultural promotion, and part of it is literature. But it would be interesting if we see the literature content of the website, because there will be a way of how to link to it on ours.
I mean, I will check now.
Okay, I will just share the screen so that someone can. I don't know why. I'm just going back to.
That's it.
Okay.
Because I think also the question of involving, I know, as it was said before here, are experts or Arab creators is important. So this is, as Jasmine said, we did very simple. We had before, it was a crazy web page. Yeah, so we just actually suit and culture, okay? And here have Arab literature.
Oh, that's the Italian.
And you're linking to Arab.
Yeah, I mean, what we do is produce or write about or translate not only book reviews, but what is happening on the Arab literature world, or this call, for example. Okay, well, because we're still changing all the categories from the old website to this one, so we have to go back to all the old website and change it.
And you have a newsletter?
Yeah, what we have, and this we have to change this, but we will have a newsletter for general information, another for cinema, and one we want to work, and that's another issue that we want to use is like for agenda to make it a collaborative, because we are a very small organization, so we cannot fulfill all the things that are happening about Arab world in Spain. So what we will do is like this thing that we talked before. We will approve certain agents that they can upload their apps.
Or even taking place in Spain or throughout Europe.
Now,
because Colin is also having a cultural agenda on Arab culture in Paris and in London. I mean, it would be interesting as we're speaking of fully.
Well, when we start was only in Spain. Okay. We were thinking even only in Madrid. But now we already are starting to put things that are happening online
in different parts,
Yes.
or something that is like Shubak Festival.
Okay.
I mean, I don't care.
Liverpool Arab.
Yeah, or the
right
film
now.
festival. I don't care if you cannot go there, but you know about it. Maybe you think for the next festival to plan to be there, or you see people or books that you never have an idea. And I mean, I think the Spanish environment is different from French or other countries because we have so little information about these issues. So maybe that's one of the things that we know so little about the Arab world, more than terrorism, etc., etc. So because also we have a project about searching the media and the idea of how the Arabs or the Muslims are portrayed, and that's terrible. So to change that, we need more information, and that's what we will do with this website. We have a very young guy now that we hope that he will, when Ibrahim is in Egypt now, and he will also make better use of the social network, this kind of issues. But that's the idea now, I mean, to publish things like you said, we were talking about the divas and also about urban art, graphic, of course, Arabic comic is. Yeah, this is what we did, an online translation course about comic from translation from Arabic into Spanish, but specific of comic. But we have so many people, and we did it with the Embassy of Spain in Algeria. So we just, with the University of Murcia, and we just have to cut it to people from Algeria, but that's also an activity. I mean, this kind of thing, or translating or getting some short translation of whatever is new published in Arabic, translated into Spanish. And I mean, the idea is to create more attractive, more easy to read or easy to access information that not what we used to translate 2 pages of Salarabi opinion
Have you tagged everything? Like Marsha was saying.
Yes, that's no, but that's very important because when we change, this is what happened in Literatura Árabe. It's a new category. Before it was tagged, so we have to make the exchange of all the articles. I mean, but it can be done automatically, alhamdulillah, because if not, it was crazy. So we have to, yes, because before we was using a lot of tags, then you have to think what you use as a category and what you use as a tag.
Yeah, that's right.
And when I was hearing about tagging too much, that's not a good idea.
It's one of the problems that LEILA will come up against. One of the challenges will be tagging in categories.
Yeah, you see, this is our still, and we clean it a lot, huh? Okay, but this is our all tag, let's say hub or whatever.
Tag
Cloud. Okay, but we still have to clean it a lot, so it is useful.
I think we saw with Yasmina and now Pedro how complicated websites can be and how necessary it is for simplicity. Going back to your rules, I mean, what you said, do simple and right?
Yeah, but that's it. That's why I think it's very important. I mean, you always can change things, but if you have a clear idea for you, because our computer engineer, he's crazy with us. He said, you want to change again, it's not working, so we have to find another way. So it's, and he's working now on this matching thing that will be the agenda. People will do it automatically. We will produce a newsletter by itself and will appear here. Hopefully will be done automatically.
You said that you want to express some
I wish to have this function, and then the guy who was building up this website for you, he answers, well, you should have said that 6 months before. Now it's too late.
I mean, this is a
Because it has been built already, and we cannot reach anymore.
Yeah. But what we did this time, because I said this is WordPress, but it's has nothing to do with the WordPress we used in 2012. Now you can do, I mean, we pay a little bit more, not much, and you can do personalized, so he has no chance of escaping saying, you said you can personalize everything here, and we learn a lot to change ourselves things. That's what is finally what is happening. But it's, I mean, it allows you to have, like here, we will have a map of the Arab world. We decide also what was said by Russia this morning, that we will have this, más allá del mundo árabe. Arab world and beyond, because we have a discussion. Diaspora, what is diaspora? Then this generation, this Arab origin people, they are diaspora. We are fighting for them to be recognized as multicultural Spanish citizens. So that's why we call it like that, because we also want to make diffusion of Arab authors that they live in Spain. It can be Mohsen Ramli, that he's Iraqi, and even if he's Spanish, or this new generation of Arabs that they are doing rap, writing. We're talking about writing, etc. So that's the idea. Trying to mix all this on purpose, so people they get the link between their neighbors and all this. But let's see, after 20 years.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you. Do you want to go on with the discussion or keep it for tomorrow? Or
I'm lost because of the program. We'll catch up with the program. I think, thank you so much, Pedro. And I think with what we discussed now with Pedro and with Marcia this morning, there are some logics that are already here for the website, for the agenda, the cultural agenda. I think both Marcia and Pedro, and we'll find what other partners such as Arab Club, etc. contributing, but I think pooling the resources, we will find ways. But no, so what I think now is also for the discussions we had at the breaks about the catalog, the selection, it seems that whatever we were trying also to do is a workshop that was like to map together all the existing resources that we would like to feature here, to introduce, to present, etc., and to organize in the sections of the website. In the end, there is already a kind of general architecture of the website that we did have in mind. And maybe it's not such a complicated task. We will ask you at some time tomorrow, we will reorganize, readapt the program so that we don't lose issues that weren't raised today. But maybe it can go quicker than what we thought, to map the resources together, think of how to introduce them and to place them in the section boxes, etc. More important, I think, the whole thing that everyone has as a main expectation about what LEILA will produce. Everything is a question of databases, authors, writing, new voices, etc., etc. So I think we have to re-approach our whole catalog idea, the whole selection idea. Maybe we have to start and discuss news feeds of the LEILA one. I mean, I don't think we can wait for LEILA 2 to come up with starting to name authors, to name unforgivable, incontournable authors, never translated. Also there, a lot of resources, lists, knowledge is already here. So we cannot wait for LEILA 2 to do more than feature 30 titles, I think. So maybe we should focus also tomorrow thinking what we started to do it also with Elisabetta, maybe what kind of news feed, a blog that would present new titles. We cannot wait until we have 300 pitch technique of an author and a book to be speaking about
about the production, literary creation, and all that. So we can keep in mind that with the translators, we will do a catalog, and tomorrow we can also discuss what we will do, a selection of 30 titles, etc., as we said. But we need other ways, I think, in a kind of blog or columns, and to think of what kind of people to give the hand to for that, but to already start within the time of LEILA 1 to be bringing titles, names of other authors, etc., etc. So we should reorient the discussion to this point. I think we're too poor in LEILA 1 about producing suggestions and all that in titles, and that we could focus maybe on that tomorrow. So I try to reorganize tomorrow's program so that we can really, and also all of you had propositions on this end. So to have one part about the static content, like centralizing resources already existing, linking to it, and having them in a kind of very classical presentation. And then having the whole discussion about the knowledge that is already there to already come up with propositions, authors, etc., etc.
But I think there's something to remember in that you're all experts, but you want your site to be for publishers who don't have access to that which you have an expertise already. So I think it's really important to keep it simple, because things that will seem obvious to you are not at all obvious to the publisher at Gallimard who's looking for whatever it is and knows nothing about the Arab world.
Yes,
so
exactly. But so I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the knowledge is already there. So if Richard and Elisabeth sit on the table, they could come up like for
the very simple.
Like
easy.
this week, we come with like these 2 titles that have been translated in many languages in Europe, but are still not translated and not available. So, I mean, we have to find how we could element, feed this. But I think we shouldn't wait until we have 100 others or till we start to speak of books, you know what I mean, and publishers find authors and titles, because information on the Arab book markets, it's as simple as for now giving the information that is there. Now there is Yasmina mentioned it as well, the study that has been just published by the Arab Publishers Union that is there, that we'll see we can translate. Then also, and then we also tomorrow we commissioned partial links on writing 8 articles on the transfers themes. You read the one which are on the detective novel, another on kidlets, etc. So we do have some static content to organize, I mean, the introduction to Arabic literature, the Arab book market, etc. We can link to the book fairs. I mean, maybe all these parts of linking to existing content is easier than how to come up, and not in 5 years, we're starting to give names of authors, titles, etc., etc. And so we can concentrate on this tomorrow, how to do it in a shorter time than what we expected, because the knowledge is there, and teaching a book is not work of a whole year, you know, like for translators. So maybe we can focus on that more. I try to reorganize the point of tomorrow, and also to get back then to the issues that we like. Maybe it will be the final issue we said with Olivia, then the identity of LEILA as a collective, like, or the statement, etc. It will also come up of our discussions. And then there was this question for us, it's important, it's a yes or no question, but given also Pedro's presentation right now, and the collective interest also for graphic novels, for theater, for events in literary life, etc., I think maybe we can agree that we should also target cultural operators and managers throughout Europe, and not only publishers with our website. It's a yes, no, I don't know.
It's up to you. It's a big, I think it will be a big work. Yes, I mean, it's up to you.
It depends what you mean by cultural operators. You restrain cultural operators to those who work within the scope of the book.
Yes, yes,
okay.
Of course, yes.
It's already
yes, of course, it would be cultural operators working in the scope of the book and working on the written material, and not culture.
So book fairs,
Maison de la Poésie, international literature festivals such as Berlin, and then also the foundations, like there is the littéraire colloquium in Berlin. I mean, there are certain literature places. I mean, I thought, yes, of course, not of the whole cultural institutions, but the specialized ones. Arabic.
Sama is saying cultural affairs should be a nice to have rather than.
But culture, it's a LEILA too.
Nice to have, not a must have.
She should adopt a Garrett lingo.
I know you said it's a nice to have. Yes. Which means that we didn't solve the question.
That means
No,
think about it later,
means
not
think
now.
about it later, roll the line.
Not
and
now.
it will be in the,
Okay,
other
no,
session.
She says later.
What do you mean exactly with targeting?
To also have, like, for instance, if we want to map the initiatives promoting Arabic literature in Europe, etc., then mapping initiatives such as Bozar, for instance, in Beirut, who are like working on contemporary theater and sometimes publishing translations of theater plays. I don't know, yeah, you know them, Mesra?
I think like one potential way of doing that is if it's something you want to promote on the site, but you don't want to build the calendar yet, then you can start with like just a simple blog, and then you can start by sharing, okay, like next month there's a Arabic literature festival in Madrid or whatever, and then you can see how that's used on the site. You can look at the traffic. And you can say, okay, look, this is the sort of thing that's getting a lot of traffic. So maybe then we need to build an actual agenda, or maybe people are not interested in it, and then you can say, okay, let's do that.
And something else that, oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say something else that might be really useful, because I thought of your blog is a newsletter, like an email newsletter, because those are very, very efficient.
Yes, most of the new agencies also
exactly.
Work,
so you have maybe that's something to talk about. Like, should you have a newsletter once a week or twice a month?
Yes.
Every 15 days, whatever, with all these new things linking to the events.
Okay, so we'll pass, but a bit quicker on like the proposed architecture main categories, existing content to be placed here or there, etc., and the content that we commission, produce. I was mentioning Marcia's.
My proposal for if you want to, and I think I agree with Samar, to contact cultural operators or whatever you want to call it. I mean, my experience is they are up to here. So they don't want to have a database of, but maybe what it will work is packages. Have 5 hierarchy authors, 3 or by themes, resistance literature in the Arab world, or I don't know, that they can program, or they can then ask you, no, but we are going to do a special issue about, I don't know, traveling by foot. Do you have authors that have books about that? And then we contact you. But giving them like a lot of information.
No, for us it wasn't really curatorial content, but while you were speaking, I'm also thinking that it's in Berlin that we will have as guests for the whole discussion, that we'll have cultural institutions specializing also in a proposition from the Arabic creation. So then we can show them the website that we have that's targeting publishers, and also discuss with them, like if under the kind of umbrella also of Bozar, who wants to start something within LEILA with creating special evenings on the new scene of Saudi poetry, etc., If some dynamic comes up that they also want on the website to have like this kind of news exchange or curatorial propositions, then we can leave it to Berlin and maybe consider it a second priority.
Then you will include all the
This is a core discussion that will take place tomorrow. Like one of the things we started to say is that like the information we will provide on books, LEILA will always have to have the information about in which languages it has already been translated. But the whole website, the information will be in English.
I know, but also you consider the Arabic in Spanish like at this list of the translation?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yes, of course. This
So
of
it's
course.
only talking.
Yes, and this is one of the core projects that is already LEILA 2 is to do this database of everything that has been translated in European languages in the 10 or 20 last years. Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just ask? Sorry.
No,
Can I just ask where you will get that data from?
Where?
Where will you get that information from?
This we'll discuss tomorrow. For instance, Richard did a study on France. Elisabetta took her own notes and has a database on Italy, Germany. It's Litprom doing it. Stefan might tell us about it tomorrow. And Stefan also had his own research and his program on Germany. And then then we'll have to commission maybe people for smaller. But on the big, it's good that it's on the big translation markets that the information is already kind of there and available. Yes.
Should we stop today?
Yes. But do you think, Gareth, tell us that this can still go somewhere tomorrow? Because if today we say in databases and this and that, are we brainstorming like in a way?
I mean, we're still brainstorming, but so tomorrow, I think on the schedule we've got some of this, but it's going to change out. But if we can kind of like deep dive into the functionality, and just agree on what that functionality is. So, for example, we talked about the search engine, and just very briefly, you can question
the newsletter.
So where does all this data come from? Who's responsible for updating it? What does that search look like? What are the criteria you can search by? Just all these kind of questions, just so that we can all be in agreement about what that should look like. And then I can make notes, and then we can just confirm that we are.
Okay.
I was gonna suggest that we can start with a sort of, okay, we are here with this website, but then it has this, and then start back deconstructing again, but just like do your upon that.
Yes.
Everything you had in mind at the beginning and when we're always added. Like
start the day with that.
But you need to subtract.
Exactly.
Keep track of everything you had in mind at the beginning and then everything we've discussed so far, but just like as a starting point.
We do that in summer tonight.
And another thing that Gareth didn't say, but that's very useful, I think, is when we work together on a huge site all about books and literature that was similar to what Yasmina wanted to do. We already know what doesn't work and what one should leave behind.
Yes.
And one of the things you said, which was very interesting from that discussion, is like keep it simple. One of the things that struck me was she said like, oh, we want this kind of integration with SoundCloud or with whatever, so we can see what people are listening to. It's like, it's a crazy fun idea, but who would use that? Like I'm looking to translate works of literature. I don't need to know like the people listening to samba in Brazil. So that's like the keep it simple.
Yes, but I love the heart.
But she did say the heart has to come to the hand. So it's a lot of dreaming and then narrowing it down in a funnel. And actually what is functional and practical, but what is useful for people. It needs to be useful for people.
And I think that's something you can iterate. So you can like a first version, a second version, a third version. You build what you think is like the minimum that will be useful for people, and you can see how it's used, and then you can get feedback rather than saying, okay, we're going to build this like 60 stories skyscraper, and you start and it takes you 10 years. You build just like the first floor, and you're like, do you like this room? Is it nice? Does it have light? And then you can say, okay, let's keep going. Or you can say, okay, this didn't work. Let's switch direction. That's a really useful way to get feedback and build on the experience of your users.
Yeah, you can add the curtains.
Yes. Okay, but so you agree on that we can focus more after the whole part of where are we standing and what is the functionalities and all that we focus on new ideas about the numbers of books, the catalog, the selection, and if there are other ways to start and present books on LEILA 1 through kind of blog translators created by one of them. You know what I mean? So that we kind of newsletter to teach from the beginning of the launch of the website, because this is the information everybody wants.
Absolutely. And I have to apologize because I won't be here tomorrow.
I know, I regret that. I guess you regret. I'm sorry for you because this would have been your.
No, but I will let you also my comments from today. Maybe not tonight, but I do in the next few days, so that we have
Yes, this would be great. So great to meet you. Also, we do consider you, Laurence, as one of our
Maybe would you mind maybe sending the link collective mail? No, collective mail with the email address.
Email addresses on envelope. Okay, I will do that.
Can you see me your notes because I'm taking notes.
Yes,
Just in case.
Now I don't know going like I'm sure those things as Jonathan and all that like I don't know if you will all make an informal like link somewhere. I don't know because we have to run now. But I'd love to join you if you are at a bigger table somewhere later. I don't know if you're doing
Yeah, okay, nice. What's the time now? It's 5 o'clock.
it's almost 6.
It's almost 6.
Oh.
How about meeting at 7:30 or something, or 8? I don't know.
Was it